My son brought me to an isolated cabin near the Canadian border, claiming we needed to reconnect after his mother died. When I woke up the next morning, the boat was missing and the radio was destroyed. I realized my own flesh and blood had left me stranded in the freezing wilderness with no way out. So I thought, all right, son. But I spent 40 years as a homicide detective, and we do not give up that easily. My name is Warwick. I am 69 years old. Before I continue this story of survival and absolute justice, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe betrayal should always be met with a cold reckoning. I opened my eyes on a hard wooden cot. The air inside the cabin bit at my lungs like shards of glass. The iron stove sat completely dark, its ashes cold and lifeless. Silence hung heavy in the room, thick enough to suffocate a man. I pushed the heavy wool blanket aside and stood up. My boots hit the freezing floorboards with a dull thud. Dion was not in the adjacent bunk. His sleeping bag was perfectly rolled, and his tactical gear was missing. I crossed the small room in 3 long strides and kicked the heavy front door open. The freezing morning air slammed into my chest, stealing my breath. I stepped onto the wooden planks of the porch and looked down at the water. The dock was completely empty. The aluminum motorboat we used to navigate 30 miles of treacherous water from the mainland was entirely gone. The mooring lines had not snapped. They had been untied and taken, leaving absolutely no trace. The vast expanse of the lake stared back at me, gray and unforgiving under the heavy morning clouds. Dion was gone. He took our only means of escape and vanished before sunrise. My son had planned this departure with meticulous precision while I slept. I stood alone on the edge of the wilderness, breathing in the freezing air. The isolation was absolute. No engine noise echoed across the water. Just the overwhelming silence of a meticulously executed abandonment. I spun around and marched back into the dark cabin. We had an emergency satellite radio on the kitchen counter for situations exactly like this. I reached for the black handset. It was dead. I traced the thick black power cord down to the battery pack. The wire had been severed cleanly. Someone had used heavy-duty wire cutters to snip the connection right at the base, rendering the device entirely useless. This was no accident or thoughtless mistake. This was deliberate sabotage. My mind flashed back to 3 days ago in my suburban driveway. I remembered my daughter-in-law Courtney meticulously packing my canvas duffel bag. She offered me a tight plastic smile as she zipped the main compartment. She insisted on packing my medical supplies herself, claiming she wanted to ensure I had everything for the harsh climate. Dion stood next to her with his hands deep in his pockets. He looked me right in the eyes and promised this trip would be the perfect way for us to reconnect. He said we needed time away from the city to heal the grief of Valerie passing away last winter. He played the grieving son perfectly. I had bought every word of his emotional performance. Courtney manipulated his actions from the shadows, wrapping his cowardice in a guise of family bonding. The severed radio cord proved their true intentions. They brought me to this remote wasteland to silence me permanently without ever pulling a trigger themselves. My chest tightened with a sharp, undeniable pain. I needed my blood pressure medication to prevent a major cardiac event under this extreme stress. I lunged toward the canvas duffel bag resting on the floor near the dead stove. My heart pounded furiously against my ribs, echoing in my ears like a war drum. I ripped the zipper open and grabbed the small black medical pouch Courtney had packed with such supposed care. I tore the Velcro flap back and pulled out the familiar orange prescription bottle. The label clearly bore my name and the correct dosage instructions. I twisted the child-proof cap off and dumped the entire contents onto the rough wooden dining table. The sound of hard objects clattering against the timber filled the quiet room. I stared at the pile in absolute disbelief. Instead of the small blue pills required to keep my heart functioning, dozens of round white breath mints scattered across the floor. They rolled under the chairs and bounced off the walls, a mocking testament to a cold-blooded execution plan. Courtney had emptied my life-saving medication and replaced it with cheap candy. She knew my heart condition was severe. She knew a steep drop in temperature coupled with immense physical exertion would trigger a massive heart attack without those pills. The pieces of their lethal puzzle locked together in my mind with terrifying clarity. They did not just abandon me to face the elements. They engineered a physiological time bomb within my own chest. They wanted nature to do their dirty work, leaving no fingerprints, no murder weapon, and no direct evidence of foul play. The sheer brutality of their betrayal hit me harder than the freezing wind outside. I stared at the mints, realizing their malice knew no bounds. A cold wave of panic threatened to paralyze my mind. The lack of medication and the extreme isolation were a deadly combination. I took a heavy step forward and crushed a white mint under the heel of my boot. The sharp crack grounded me in the present moment. I closed my eyes and forced my frantic heart to slow down. I utilized tactical breathing techniques drilled into me during my days at the police academy. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4. I repeated the cycle until the tremor in my hands ceased entirely. I could not afford the luxury of grief or shock. As a former homicide detective, I had seen the absolute worst of human nature, but facing it from my own child was a different kind of war. I accepted the harsh reality instantly. My own flesh and blood left me here to die alone so he could claim my assets. Dion wanted an easy inheritance, and Courtney wanted the executioner prize without the risk. I opened my eyes, the panic replaced by a cold, hardened resolve. They expected a fragile old man to perish quietly in the snow. They were entirely wrong. I scanned the cabin for anything that could extend my survival. I grabbed the thick thermal curtains hanging over the windows and tore them down from their metal rods. Using my hunting knife, I slashed the heavy fabric into wide strips and wrapped them tightly around my torso, arms, and legs to fashion makeshift thermal insulation. I laced my boots tight and secured the fabric with electrical tape I found in a kitchen drawer. I grabbed a heavy walking stick from the corner and kicked the front door open again. I stepped out into the biting wind that immediately slashed at my exposed face. The sky above had turned a menacing shade of bruised purple. The first heavy snowflakes of a massive blizzard began to fall around me, swirling violently in the frigid air. The storm was arriving days earlier than the forecast predicted. I looked down at the faint tire tracks leading away from the cabin toward the distant highway. The fast-falling snow was already burying the only trail connecting me to civilization. I tightened my grip on the wooden stick and marched directly into the whiteout. The hunt had officially begun. The temperature plummets far below freezing as the morning sun struggles to pierce the dense canopy of the Canadian border forest. I trudge through the accumulating snow, relying entirely on the faint solar glare to maintain a southern trajectory. Every step requires a monumental exertion of force against the mounting white drifts. The harsh wind slices through my makeshift thermal wraps, seeking bare skin and stealing my core body heat. My 69-year-old lungs burn with every inhaled breath of the icy air. I keep my focus fixed on the tree line ahead, ignoring the biting cold clawing at my extremities. Suddenly, a familiar, agonizing pressure grips the center of my chest. It radiates outward, a vice tightening around my ribs with terrifying strength. Without my daily blood pressure medication, my cardiovascular system begins to rebel against the extreme physical demand. I force myself to stop and lean heavily against the rough bark of a towering pine. The absence of those small blue pills makes every heartbeat feel like a jagged stone grinding inside my chest cavity. I take measured, shallow breaths, commanding my body to endure the strain. The freezing environment and the treacherous terrain are actively working to finish the execution Dion and Courtney orchestrated. I push off the tree trunk and resume my march. I cannot afford to stop moving. Survival depends on generating body heat and finding a way out of this frozen labyrinth before my damaged heart surrenders completely to the merciless cold. As I push through the snow, the biting wind brings back echoes of Sunday dinners at my dining table. I remember Courtney swirling her wine glass, offering that condescending smirk while she spoke to Dion. She constantly referred to me as a fragile burden, a relic merely existing on a state pension. She believed I was nothing more than a helpless old man taking up space in their future. Her arrogant assumptions were rooted in absolute ignorance. She never knew about the events from 20 years ago. She never knew I survived a brutal 3-day manhunt in the unforgiving terrain of the Rocky Mountains, tracking a serial killer through a blizzard far worse than this one. That operation demanded a level of resilience she could never fathom. I channel that memory now. The rapidly dropping temperature dictates I must secure a heat source immediately to prevent severe hypothermia. I gather a handful of dry pine needles from beneath the thickest tree branches and pile them on a flat stone. I take off my wristwatch and smash the glass face against a rock. I extract the small lithium battery and use the conductive wire from my ruined radio cord to create a short circuit. A tiny glowing spark catches the dry needles. I blow gently, coaxing the fragile ember into a steady flame. I build a small contained fire, warming my frozen hands. The tactical knowledge from my past becomes my greatest weapon against the death trap my son arranged. A low guttural growl shatters the quiet crackle of my small fire. The sound vibrates through the frozen air, carrying a primal threat that instantly triggers my adrenaline. I slowly turn my head toward the dense thicket of frosted pines. A massive, terrifying timber wolf steps out from the dark shadows, its gray fur matted with ice and dirt. The beast looks entirely emaciated, its ribs showing prominently against its flanks. Starvation has driven it near the fire, stripping away its natural fear of human presence. Its yellow eyes lock onto me with predatory focus. The wolf bares its teeth, emitting a vicious snarl that echoes across the desolate landscape. Running is completely out of the question. The deep snow would hinder my movements, and turning my back on a starving predator is a guaranteed death sentence. I must hold my ground and establish absolute dominance. I slowly reach down to my belt and unclip the heavy hunting knife I always carry in the wilderness. The cold steel handle feels very reassuring in my palm. The wolf takes a cautious step forward, its muscles tensing for a sudden strike. I plant my boots firmly into the packed snow, adopting a defensive, grounded stance. I stare directly into the animal's eyes, refusing to show a single ounce of fear or vulnerability. The air between us grows thick with deadly tension. I calculate the distance, knowing I only have one chance to deter the attack before those jaws reach my throat. The beast lunges forward, kicking up a spray of white powder as it closes the gap. I do not flinch. I grip my knife in my right hand and reach for the burning pine branch with my left, fully prepared to fight for my life against the savage reality of nature. As the wolf lunges through the air, I swing the burning pine branch upward with a violent burst of strength. The thick, smoking wood connects directly with the beast's sensitive snout. A shower of hot orange embers explodes against its face. The wolf lets out a sharp, agonized yelp and aborts its attack mid-air. It hits the ground sideways, scrambling backward into the deep snowdrifts to escape the scorching heat. The sudden, intense burn totally overrides its desperate hunger. The predator glares at me one last time, recognizing that I am not an easy target. It turns and disappears quickly into the dark, frozen shadows of the forest. I stand perfectly still, gripping the smoldering branch and my hunting knife, my breath pluming rapidly in the freezing air. I do not celebrate the victory. There is absolutely no room for relief in this environment. The encounter cost me precious physical energy and elevated my heart rate to a dangerous level. I drop the burning branch into the snow, resheath my weapon, and immediately resume my march southward. The clock is relentlessly ticking and the wilderness is actively closing in. I must keep moving forward without a single moment of hesitation. The extreme physical exertion from the fight demands a steep toll on my compromised cardiovascular system. A sharp, crushing pressure suddenly explodes in the center of my chest, far worse than before. My vision swims the bright white snow, turning into dark, blurry patches. I stumble forward, my legs losing their coordination as my blood pressure spikes uncontrollably. The lack of medication is tearing my internal systems apart. I gasp for oxygen, but the freezing air offers zero relief. My knees buckle beneath my weight, and I collapse heavily into the deep, freezing snowbank. The icy ground bites into my face. The edges of my consciousness begin to fade into an encroaching darkness. I focus all my remaining willpower on keeping my eyes open, refusing to let Dion and Courtney win this lethal game. As I lay paralyzed in the snow, a low, rhythmic vibration begins to travel through the frozen earth beneath my ear. It is not the wind, nor is it a wild animal. I strain to focus my hearing. The distinct heavy rumble of a massive diesel engine echoes faintly from several miles away. A logging highway exists somewhere in the distance, offering a path to survival. The crushing weight in my chest intensifies with every agonizing heartbeat. The lack of blood pressure medication is causing my cardiovascular system to rapidly shut down in this sub-zero wasteland. The dark edges of my vision close in tightly. I know from decades on the force that hypothermia combined with cardiac arrest will kill me in less than 10 minutes. I refuse to die as a victim in my own son's cowardly scheme. I pull my heavy hunting knife from its sheath. The cold steel bites into my frozen palm. I drag the razor-sharp edge directly across my left forearm. The sudden searing physical pain sends a massive spike of adrenaline coursing through my entire body. The intense shock artificially overrides the crushing tightness in my chest, forcing my heart to pump violently and keeping my brain awake. Warm blood slowly seeps through the layers of my makeshift thermal wraps, providing a grim reminder that I am still alive. I clench my jaw against the biting wind and drop to my knees. The rhythmic rumble of a heavy diesel engine grows slightly louder over the howling blizzard. I use my walking stick to drag my failing body forward through the deep snowdrifts. Every inch is a grueling battle against the elements and my own failing anatomy. I push through the dense pine branches, ignoring the sharp needles scraping against my freezing face. The mechanical growl becomes a distinct roar, serving as my only beacon in this freezing hell. I break through the final barrier of thick evergreens and collapse onto the hard shoulder of a remote logging highway. The asphalt is completely covered in a slick sheet of fresh ice. The biting wind whips down the open corridor, chilling the sweat on my brow. As I lie gasping on the frozen ground, a specific memory burns vividly in my mind. It was exactly 4 weeks ago in my living room. Dion sat on my sofa with his hands nervously clasped together. Courtney stood behind him with her arms crossed and a demanding glare in her eyes. Dion pleaded with me to take out a massive second mortgage on my house. He claimed Courtney needed a rapid cash injection to save her failing fashion boutique from total bankruptcy. I looked at the extravagant designer clothes she wore and the brand new luxury car parked in my driveway. I flatly refused to leverage my life savings to finance their reckless vanity project. Courtney stormed out of my house without saying a single word. Dion looked at me with a chilling mix of desperation and deep resentment before following her out the door. I realize now that my simple refusal to hand over my hard-earned money was the exact moment they signed my death warrant. They needed my assets urgently, and removing me from the equation was their only viable solution. The sound of air brakes hissing violently snaps me back to the brutal present reality. A massive 18-wheeler emerges from the blinding curtain of falling snow. Its twin headlights pierce the whiteout like demonic eyes illuminating the treacherous icy road. The heavy diesel engine roars as the vehicle hurtles forward at highway speeds, fully loaded with thousands of pounds of fresh timber. I force myself to stand up, my bloodied arm throbbing with sharp pain. If I stay on the shoulder, the driver will never see my dark figure against the dense forest backdrop. I will freeze to death in this snowbank before another vehicle passes through this remote route. I tighten my grip on my walking stick and step directly into the center of the icy lane. The truck is less than 200 yards away and closing the distance rapidly. I raise my arms high above my head, standing completely still in the direct path of the speeding behemoth. The driver sounds a deafening continuous blast from his air horn, desperately demanding that I move out of the way. I hold my ground, bracing my frozen boots against the slippery asphalt. I am wagering my entire existence on this man's reflexes. The driver locks the heavy air brakes. The massive tires screech violently against the ice, sending a huge cloud of white powder into the freezing air. The enormous steel grille of the truck slides dangerously out of control, fishtailing slightly as momentum pushes it forward. The deafening roar of grinding metal and hissing hydraulics consumes the quiet forest. The enormous vehicle finally shudders to a complete halt. The front steel bumper stops merely 3 inches away from my chest. The intense heat radiating from the massive engine block washes over my frozen face. I drop my arms slowly. I have survived the brutal initial impact. The driver throws his door open and jumps down from the high cab, his face pale with absolute terror. He rushes toward me, slipping slightly on the slick ice, shouting frantically about nearly killing a man. He reaches for the heavy dispatch radio clipped to his thick winter coat, loudly declaring his intention to call the state police and request an emergency medical evacuation. I step forward and rip the radio directly from his gloved hand before his thumb can press the transmission button. The sudden aggressive movement catches the man completely off guard. He stumbles backward, raising his hands defensively as he processes the sight of my bloodied arm and makeshift clothing. I reach deep into my inner coat pocket with my uninjured hand. I pull out my worn leather wallet and flip it open with a sharp flick of my wrist. The gold shield of a retired homicide detective gleams clearly under the bright glare of the truck headlights. The driver stares at the official badge, his panicked expression instantly shifting into a mask of confused compliance. I assert complete tactical authority over the situation, ensuring no official record of my rescue is ever created today. I toss the stolen radio onto the passenger seat and look the trembling driver squarely in his eyes. I command him to drive me straight to the industrial district in Seattle, making it explicitly clear that he has never seen my face and this isolated encounter never occurred. The sheer intensity in my voice leaves zero room for debate or hesitation. The driver nods quickly, fully submitting to the heavy weight of the badge and the severity of my tone. I climb up into the heated cabin of the massive rig, leaving the brutal freezing wilderness behind me. the heavy doors slam shut entirely, sealing out the howling blizzard. The powerful diesel engine roars back to life, vibrating intensely beneath the metal floorboards. The truck accelerates slowly, its heavy tires finding traction on the icy highway before surging into the dark, snow-filled night. I lean back against the firm leather seat and meticulously wrap a clean rag around my bleeding forearm. The immediate physical danger is finally over. By tomorrow morning, my son and his manipulative wife will confidently assume my frozen corpse belongs to the forest. They are profoundly mistaken. I am officially a ghost preparing to strike. The heavy logging truck grinds its gears, slowing down as it enters the desolate industrial district on the southern edge of Seattle. The relentless blizzard from the mountains has shifted into freezing torrential rain in the city. The driver does not look at me as I push the heavy passenger door open. I step down onto the wet asphalt, pulling my collar tight against the driving rain. The truck accelerates away instantly, leaving me completely swallowed by the darkness. This sector of the city is an abandoned maze of rusted warehouses, cracked pavement, and forgotten rail yards. It is the perfect place for a dead man to hide. I navigate the flooded alleyways with extreme caution. Every street lamp and intersection presents a calculated risk. I memorize the position of every rotating security camera mounted on the brick walls and chain-link fences. I time my movements perfectly, darting across the open pavement only during the brief intervals when the mechanical lenses sweep away from my position. Decades of urban surveillance training keep me entirely invisible to the digital eye. My ruined arm throbs with a dull, persistent agony, but the bleeding has stopped. I ignore the pain and push forward through the narrow, debris-filled corridors. I finally reach the dead end of a blind alley. A huge, heavily fortified auto repair shop stands before me. The windows are entirely blacked out, covered by thick iron grates. Rain hammers against the corrugated metal roof. I step to the steel door. I raise my uninjured fist and rap my knuckles against the cold steel surface. I do not knock like a civilian seeking assistance. I strike the heavy metal using a highly specific tactical rhythm we developed during undercover narcotics operations 30 years ago. 2 fast strikes, a 3-second pause, followed by 1 heavy thud. I wait in the freezing downpour. The heavy deadbolt slides back with a loud metallic clank. The door swings open a fraction of an inch. The dark, hollow barrel of a 12-gauge shotgun emerges from the shadow, aimed directly at the center of my forehead. Mitchell stands behind the weapon, his finger resting dangerously on the hair trigger. His eyes are narrowed and intensely focused, prepared to eliminate any midnight threat. I step fully into the dim yellow light spilling from the doorway. Mitchell freezes completely. The breath leaves his lungs in a sudden, sharp gasp. The heavy shotgun slips from his grip, clattering loudly against the concrete floor. He stares at me as if a phantom has just materialized on his doorstep. His shock is completely justified. The world believes I am freezing to death in a Canadian border cabin. I do not offer a warm greeting or a lengthy explanation of my miraculous survival. The situation demands immediate, decisive action. I step past him into the dry, oil-stained garage. Secure the door. I command, my voice hoarse but completely steady. I need dry clothes and your secure laptop right now, Mitchell. Mitchell kicks the shotgun aside and slams the heavy steel door shut, engaging 3 separate deadbolts. He asks absolutely no questions. He owes me his life. 25 years ago, during a massive cartel shootout at the shipping docks, I took a heavy-caliber bullet to the shoulder to provide the covering fire he needed to escape a lethal ambush. Our bond was forged in blood and absolute trust. He walks briskly to a metal locker and tosses me a clean gray sweatshirt and dark tactical pants. I strip off my freezing makeshift thermal wraps and slide into the dry clothing. The sudden warmth is immediate, but my internal focus remains entirely cold. Mitchell sets a rugged black laptop on a grease-stained workbench. The machine is heavily encrypted, directly linked to the regional law enforcement databases using his active consulting credentials. He steps back, offering me the keyboard. I type with rapid precision, bypassing the initial security firewalls. I pull up the active incident reports for the entire state of Washington. I type my own name into the search parameter. A red file instantly populates the dark screen. It is an official missing person report. My heart beats with a slow, calculating rhythm as I click the flashing digital folder to read the attached narrative. The initial anger has completely evaporated, replaced by a ruthless, analytical mindset. I scan the detailed paragraphs submitted by the primary complainant. The report officially classifies my sudden disappearance as a tragic critical emergency. I read the name of the person who initiated the police protocol. The reality of the betrayal is meticulously documented in black and white text. My son has officially declared me lost to the wilderness, setting the final stage for his brutal inheritance scheme to unfold flawlessly right now, tonight. I examined the exact timestamp stamped on the digital police document. Dion filed the missing person report precisely 4 hours after he untied the aluminum boat and abandoned me at the freezing cabin. The sheer audacity of his timeline is staggering. He barely waited for the morning sun to rise before initiating his performance for the local authorities. I scroll down to the descriptive narrative section. Dion provided a lengthy, fabricated account of my mental state. The official police record claims I wandered off into the dense frozen woods during the middle of the night due to severe untreated dementia. He painted a pitiful portrait of a confused, deeply ill old man who tragically lost his grip on reality. Courtney clearly orchestrated this narrative. Dementia provides the perfect, unquestionable excuse for my sudden disappearance in a hostile environment. It prevents the local detectives from looking for any signs of a struggle or foul play. The police are currently organizing a standard rescue operation for a vulnerable senior citizen completely unaware they are participating in a calculated murder plot. I commit every single solitary detail of his totally fabricated statement to memory, forging it into a deadly weapon for later use. Mitchell reaches over my shoulder and taps a thick finger against a flashing yellow alert located in the upper right corner of the computer monitor. The regional database highlights a critical update regarding the active case file. My eyes track across the newly uploaded legal attachment. Dion and Courtney just filed an emergency court petition in the civil division to seize immediate unilateral control of my entire estate. They are citing my alleged severe dementia and highly probable death as legal grounds for an expedited transfer of assets. They are not waiting for a confirmed body recovery or a standard waiting period. Their greed is accelerating their timeline beyond conventional boundaries. The attached schedule reveals their ultimate intention. They are rapidly moving to liquidate every single financial asset, property, and bank account in my name by this coming Friday. The legal machinery is already turning in their favor, completely unchecked by any opposing force. They believe they have successfully executed the perfect crime and are currently racing to collect their massive payout. I close the secure digital folder with intense finality. The hunt has just evolved from sheer physical survival into a highly sophisticated war to protect my life legacy. Mitchell and I waste absolutely no time tonight. We push the heavy rusted toolboxes against the cinder block walls, clearing the center of the massive auto repair shop to construct a secure operational base. I drag a folding steel table directly under the harsh fluorescent overhead lights, transforming the greasy space into a focused tactical war room. Mitchell routes the heavy black Ethernet cables through a secondary encrypted router, ensuring our digital footprint remains entirely invisible to any external surveillance. I crack my knuckles, feeling the familiar cold analytical mindset take complete control. My damaged forearm throbs with a dull ache beneath the tight bandages, but I block the pain entirely. I type a rapid sequence of tactical command codes into the secure black laptop, bypassing the standard commercial firewalls protecting Courtney and her beloved fashion boutique. It takes exactly 14 minutes to slice through her fragile digital security and access the core financial ledgers. I stare at the glaring red numbers populating the bright screen, and the truth of her perfectly manicured existence unravels instantly. Her high-end fashion boutique is not merely struggling, it is completely, totally, irrevocably bankrupt. The commercial rent is 6 months in arrears, the inventory suppliers have frozen all her pending accounts, and her primary business credit lines are entirely maxed out. Courtney projected an image of absolute superiority and flawless wealth at every family gathering, mocking my modest pension while she secretly drowned heavily in a deep, dark ocean of massive, catastrophic financial failure. I carefully dig deeper into the hidden digital transaction logs, tracing a series of desperate offshore wire transfers and highly irregular cash deposits. The shattered boutique is only the superficial surface of a much darker hidden criminal reality. I uncover the true horrifying motive behind my attempted murder in the frozen wilderness. Courtney owes exactly $2 million to a violent underground loan shark syndicate operating out of the eastern seaboard. Her relentless white supremacist arrogance, her constant need to project an image of untouchable elite status was built entirely on a crumbling foundation of massive dirty debt. She funded her lavish, fake lifestyle with illicit criminal money, and the ruthless collectors are now aggressively demanding immediate repayment. The digital paper trail reveals another sickening layer of her dangerous manipulation. I find a scanned copy of the primary loan agreement buried in a hidden encrypted email folder. She forced Dayon to co-sign the massive debt completely legally, binding him to her disastrous financial ruin. She trapped my son in an inescapable lethal corner, tying his physical survival directly to her insurmountable criminal obligations. If she defaults on the $2 million, the syndicate will not just seize her business assets. They will aggressively target Dayon for full brutal collection. My son swapped my vital heart medication for worthless mints and abandoned me to freeze because he was terrified of the violent mobsters his manipulative wife brought directly to his very doorstep. The cowardly, greedy motive is now completely crystal clear. I slowly open a secondary window on the secure laptop and seamlessly bypass the outdated security protocols of the County Civil Court Registry. I need to understand the exact scope of the emergency petition Dayon and Courtney filed just hours after leaving me in the ice. I extract the official legal filings and project the high-resolution scanned documents onto the large monitor attached to the garage wall. Mitchell stands beside me, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes scanning the dense legal paragraphs with growing disgust. They are not merely petitioning the court to seize and liquidate my suburban house. The residential property is far too small to satisfy a $2 million mob debt and fund their future escape. Their primary target is explicitly listed on the 4th page of the Emergency Financial Disclosure Form. They are ruthlessly hunting a highly classified special $3 million government life insurance policy. I received this massive, heavily guarded policy directly from the state legislature 20 years ago, immediately after taking a point-blank bullet to the chest to save the mayor during a violent city hall assassination attempt. The generous compensation was specifically designed to secure my family indefinitely if I ever fell in the line of duty. Dayon intimately knew about this specific high-value insurance policy since he was a teenager. Courtney clearly recognized it as the ultimate golden ticket to erase her massive criminal debt and walk away as a wealthy victim. The sheer audacity of their legal maneuver makes my blood run entirely cold. They plan to use my honorable sacrifice, the blood I spilled protecting this city, to pay off dirty loan sharks and finance a luxurious escape. They are now explicitly attempting to perfectly weaponize my legacy to save their own pathetic lives. I highlight the specific payout clause embedded deep within the government insurance contract. The rigid federal parameters dictate that the massive $3 million fund absolutely requires a verified official death certificate before a single cent can be released to the designated beneficiary. I lean back in the creaking metal chair, analyzing the raw data with ruthless precision. I finally understand the severe, suffocating pressure driving their highly aggressive timeline. They cannot afford to simply wait for the harsh winter to thaw and reveal a body months from now. The underground loan shark syndicate will absolutely not accept a delayed payment schedule. Dayon and Courtney need me officially legally declared dead immediately by the proper authorities to trigger the massive payout and save their own skins. Their emergency court petition is a desperate, calculated gamble to bypass the standard missing person waiting period. They are attempting to force a rapid judicial ruling by fabricating a highly compelling narrative of certain death in a treacherous environment. I stare at the glowing monitor, fully comprehending the lethal mechanics of their desperate plan. They are actively racing against a violent mob clock, and I am the only living obstacle standing in their way. Mitchell taps his fingers rapidly across a secondary tablet, running a deep digital sweep of Courtney's recently deleted communications. He stops abruptly and slides the glowing screen directly across the steel table toward me. He just successfully intercepted a highly encrypted email sent from Courtney's personal device 20 minutes ago. I silently read the clandestine message, and the final piece of their murderous puzzle snaps into perfect alignment. Courtney just wired a substantial cash retainer to a highly corrupt private search and rescue team operating near the Canadian border. I recognize the lead contractor's name immediately from my active detective days. He is a disgraced former ranger known for manipulating wilderness crime scenes for the highest bidder. Their primary objective is absolutely not to conduct a legitimate search or locate a freezing survivor. Their singular, highly paid objective is to deliberately plant falsified physical evidence of a fatal, catastrophic animal attack near the remote cabin. They intend to scatter my torn clothing and fake blood across the snow to guarantee the local authorities issue an immediate, unquestionable death certificate. The lethal trap is officially moving into its final irrevocable stage, triggering a very desperate race to intercept the planted evidence. Exactly 10 days pass in the shadows of the fortified garage. The corrupt search and rescue team executes Courtney's instructions with chilling precision. Mitchell sits silently beside me as the local news station broadcasts the breaking update across the television screen. The lead investigator holds up a clear plastic evidence bag containing my heavy winter jacket. The fabric is severely torn and heavily stained with fresh animal blood. The reporter solemnly announces that the authorities have officially halted the search operations near the Canadian border. The pristine wilderness is now entirely blamed for a tragic, fatal animal attack. The local sheriff delivers a brief statement declaring me legally dead, citing the overwhelming physical evidence and the complete lack of a survival trail. I stare at the screen, observing the meticulous fabrication of my demise broadcasted to the entire city. My own department swallows the orchestrated lie without a single ounce of genuine scrutiny. The corrupt contractors earned their blood money, successfully converting an attempted murder into a tragic act of nature. My legal status is erased with a simple stroke of a bureaucratic pen. The insurance company receives the necessary death certificate to process the massive $3 million payout. The trap closes perfectly around their fabricated narrative. The syndicate expects immediate payment, and Courtney believes she holds the ultimate winning hand. I sit in the darkness, breathing calmly, watching my own death finalize on live television. I am a deceased victim now, entirely free to move without any restriction. A grand memorial service is organized at the massive city church 48 hours later. Courtney spares absolutely no expense for the public spectacle, utilizing credit she does not possess to manufacture the illusion of deep mourning. I walk through the heavy wooden doors just as the solemn organ music begins to echo through the vaulted ceilings. I wear a thick wool overcoat, a dark beanie pulled low, and a standard blue surgical mask covering my face. I move silently along the peripheral aisle and slip into the darkest corner of the back row. Dozens of my former colleagues from the police department fill the wooden pews wearing their dress uniforms to honor a fallen detective. I sit perfectly still among the grieving crowd, a ghost attending his own final farewell. The sheer hypocrisy of the event hangs heavily in the incense-filled air. I remember taking Dion to this exact church when he was 7 years old, teaching him the fundamental values of honesty and profound respect. I sacrificed endless shifts and took countless bullets to ensure he never lacked a secure foundation. Now that same boy stands near the altar accepting condolences for a murder he actively facilitated. The beautiful floral arrangements mock the brutal truth of my freezing ordeal in the wilderness. I watch the mourners dab their eyes with tissues, entirely oblivious to the lethal conspiracy sitting in the front row. I remain perfectly concealed, observing the ultimate display of betrayal unfold right before my eyes. Dion slowly steps up to the polished wooden pulpit. He adjusts the microphone with trembling hands, projecting the absolute perfect image of a devastated, heartbroken son. He begins to deliver a disgustingly fake eulogy, his voice cracking with meticulously rehearsed emotion. He speaks passionately about my unwavering dedication to justice, recounting hollow anecdotes about fishing trips and fond childhood memories. Every single word spilling from his mouth is a calculated lie designed to cement his status as the innocent, grieving heir. He publicly mourns the father he personally left behind to freeze to death without a single trace of vital medication. Courtney sits prominently in the front pew, dressed in an immaculate, custom-tailored black funeral dress. She elegantly dabs at the corners of her eyes with a lace designer tissue, very carefully avoiding her flawless makeup. She performs the role of the distraught daughter-in-law with sickening precision, accepting sympathetic glances from the surrounding police officers. The sheer terrifying audacity of their performance makes the blood run completely cold in my veins. They are standing on holy ground, utilizing my honorable legacy to cash a $3 million check from the government. I clench my fists inside my deep coat pockets, driving my fingernails sharply into my palms to maintain my absolute silence. Dion concludes his sickening speech by tearfully promising to honor my memory every single day for the rest of his life. The congregation softly murmurs in deep collective sympathy. Courtney reaches out and squeezes his hand, projecting a unified front of family tragedy. The monstrous arrogance required to execute this public charade completely solidifies my final decision. There will be absolutely no mercy, no hesitation, and zero forgiveness when I finally bring their towering house of fragile cards crashing down directly upon their greedy heads. The memorial service finally concludes, and the large crowd slowly filters out into the gray afternoon. I slip through the side exit entirely unnoticed by the weeping attendees. I maintain a safe tactical distance and quietly track Courtney as she separates from Dayon and heads toward the lower levels of the church. She descends the concrete stairs into the damp, poorly lit underground parking lot. The air down here is heavy with the sharp scent of motor oil and exhaust. Courtney walks briskly toward her parked luxury sedan, her posture immediately shifting from grieving widow to hardened opportunist. A tall, broad-shouldered man steps out from behind a concrete pillar, completely blocking her path. He wears a sharp, expensive gray suit and carries an unmistakable aura of disciplined violence. He is a high-ranking enforcer for the underground loan shark syndicate. I quickly slide behind a parked van, utilizing the dark shadows to completely conceal my position. The man does not offer condolences. He steps aggressively into Courtney's personal space, demanding an immediate status update on the massive $2 million debt. Courtney does not flinch, boldly showcasing her deeply ingrained arrogance despite facing this immediate, highly lethal danger alone. I pull a compact directional microphone from my deep coat pocket and aim the small receiver directly at the hostile pair. I press the record button, capturing crystal-clear audio of their illicit negotiation. Courtney crosses her arms and confidently promises the enforcer the entire $2 million payment by early next week. She explains that the fake death certificate is officially secured and the massive government insurance payout is currently processing. The enforcer nods slowly, accepting the timeline, but issuing a dark warning about the severe consequences of failure. Courtney smiles a completely venomous, predatory smile. She leans forward and delivers a chilling, horrific detail that seals her ultimate fate. "Do whatever you want with Dion afterward," she states with absolute terrifying indifference. "He served his purpose perfectly. I am taking my personal cut of the remaining million and leaving permanently for Paris." The enforcer chuckles darkly and walks away into the shadows. I stop the recording and save the audio file securely to my encrypted device. Courtney plans to steal the money, abandon her massive mob debt, and offer my son up for slaughter. I step backward into the dark shadows, entirely prepared to spring my federal trap. I sit in the dimly lit garage, the heavy concrete walls absorbing the cold silence of the Seattle night. The glowing screen of the secure laptop casts a pale light across the greasy steel workbench. I press the space bar. The audio file plays again. The sharp, calculated voice of Courtney echoes through the small speakers, promising the syndicate enforcer the $2 million. Then comes the phrase that permanently extinguishes the last flickering ember of my paternal love. She tells the mobster to do whatever he wants with Dion afterward. She plans to take her cut of my life insurance money and escape to Paris, leaving my only son to be slaughtered by the underground loan sharks. I play the recording on a continuous loop, letting the sheer malice of her words wash over me until all shock hardens into absolute unbreakable resolve. My son is a cowardly murderer who willingly left me to die in a freezing Canadian blizzard, but he is fundamentally weak. Courtney is the true apex predator in this lethal equation. She orchestrated the fatal timeline, manipulated the deep-seated financial insecurities of Dion, and prepared the final sacrificial altar for her own husband. She views human lives as disposable currency to fund her white supremacist arrogance and designer lifestyle. The betrayal is total, slicing through decades of family history. I close the audio player and shut the laptop screen. I am no longer a grieving father mourning a lost child. I am an executioner now. To crush a parasite driven entirely by material greed, you must strike directly at the foundation of their absolute wealth. Courtney firmly believes she is the smartest person in any room, operating under the dangerous assumption that my entire financial portfolio consists solely of a modest suburban house and a standard police pension. She is completely unaware of the vast, invisible empire I built alongside my late wife. 25 years ago, Valerie and I quietly invested my early tactical consulting fees into commercial real estate. We shielded our growing assets behind a highly secure, heavily fortified blind trust to protect our family from the vindictive retaliation of the dangerous cartels I dismantled. That impenetrable legal structure holds the ultimate irony. I secretly own the massive high-end commercial plaza located precisely in the center of the downtown shopping district. Courtney currently leases her bankrupt, failing fashion boutique directly from my anonymous corporate entity. I am her invisible landlord. every single month she unknowingly pays rent into my hidden accounts while mocking my supposed financial fragility at the dinner table. She built her entire elitist identity inside a building I personally own. Now, I will weaponize that ignorance to orchestrate their immediate downfall. I open a fresh digital folder on the encrypted laptop and begin drafting the necessary corporate directives to initiate an immediate lease termination. They want to play a high-stakes game of asset liquidation. I will gladly show them how a master controls the entire financial board. Mitchell returns to the workbench carrying 2 cups of black coffee. I brief him on the newly formulated strategy. We need to force Dion and Courtney into committing a highly documented, undeniable federal crime before the life insurance company releases the $3 million payout on Friday. Their desperation makes them incredibly vulnerable to a massive financial trap. Mitchell grins, fully understanding the assignment. He grabs a burner phone, clears his throat, and dials the private cell phone number belonging to Dion. Mitchell effortlessly slips into the persona of an aggressive, wealthy foreign real estate developer looking to aggressively acquire prime residential property. I listen through the external speaker as Dion cautiously answers the unexpected call. Mitchell does not waste a single second with polite pleasantries. He immediately dominates the conversation, speaking with rapid, overwhelming authority. He tells Dion that his international development firm requires my specific suburban lot to finalize a massive commercial zoning project. Mitchell offers to buy the house entirely in cash for exactly triple its current market value. He clearly stipulates that the incredibly lucrative offer comes with one non-negotiable condition. The transaction must absolutely close within 24 hours, or the international firm will completely withdraw the cash offer and walk away. I watch the audio waves spike on the digital monitor as Dion audibly gasps at the proposed purchase price. The staggering amount of immediate, untraceable cash acts like a powerful narcotic on his panicked, debt-ridden mind. The looming threat of the underground loan shark syndicate is pushing him into a corner, and Mitchell just threw him an enormous, completely irresistible financial lifeline. Mitchell barks a final demand for a rapid decision, pressuring the boy to abandon all logic. Dion stammers wildly, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the sudden monetary windfall. Dion takes the bait instantly. He desperately agrees to the immediate sale, his voice trembling with sheer unadulterated greed. He completely ignores the highly suspicious nature of a random, massively inflated cash offer arriving perfectly in his darkest hour of need. He enthusiastically promises Mitchell that the property will be entirely ready for transfer by tomorrow afternoon. Mitchell hangs up the burner phone and tosses it onto the steel table with a sharp clatter. We exchange a silent, highly satisfied look. The legal trap is perfectly primed. I intimately know the property laws in this state. Dion cannot legally sell my suburban house under any legitimate circumstances. My name is the absolute only name listed on the official property deed. He currently lacks a verified death certificate, and I never granted him any form of legal control over my personal assets. He has absolutely no legal authority to authorize a real estate transfer. To execute this rapid cash sale and secure the funds, Dion and Courtney must completely fabricate my consent. They are willingly walking blindly into an inescapable legal corner. They are completely blinded by the overwhelming allure of instant wealth, carelessly discarding all rational thought and basic caution. Mitchell looks at me, his weathered face set in a hard, predatory expression. He quickly confirms the final details of the newly arranged meeting. Dion explicitly promised to bring a fully executed comprehensive power of attorney document to the scheduled closing tomorrow at the downtown law office. The reality of his statement hangs heavily in the cold garage air. They intend to produce a binding legal contract supposedly bearing my authentic signature. Since I never drafted or signed such a document, they are going to use explicitly forged documents to steal my estate. Presenting a fabricated power of attorney to facilitate a multi-million-dollar wire transfer constitutes a massive, undeniable federal crime. They are actively elevating their local criminal conspiracy into a severe federal offense, absolutely guaranteeing a lengthy prison sentence upon discovery. Mitchell prepares the necessary covert recording equipment for the closing meeting tomorrow morning. I turn my attention back to the encrypted laptop securing the digital connection to the federal database. I begin compiling the financial records, the audio files, and the property deeds into a single devastating evidentiary package. The federal trap is officially set, and the reckless predators are sprinting eagerly toward their own destruction. Part 8. The Forged Signature. Mitchell pushes open the heavy glass doors of the downtown law firm. The pristine environment of marble floors and mahogany-paneled walls sharply contrasts with the grease-stained garage we left behind. He walks with the confident, aggressive stride of a wealthy international developer, used to getting exactly what he wants. A tiny high-definition camera lens is seamlessly integrated into the top button of his tailored suit jacket, transmitting a live encrypted feed directly to my laptop. I sit in the dark garage watching the monitor intently as the receptionist guides Mitchell into an expansive glass conference room. Dion and Courtney are already sitting at the long polished table. Their posture betrays their absolute desperation. Dion looks completely exhausted, his eyes darting nervously around the room while his hands tremble slightly on top of his leather briefcase. He is buckling under the massive weight of the underground mob debt and the escalating lies. Courtney, however, sits perfectly straight. She wears a sharp designer blazer projecting an artificial aura of complete control, but her rigid jawline and forced smile reveal the immense pressure she is under. They need this massive cash infusion immediately to satisfy the violent loan shark syndicate and fund their escape to Paris. Mitchell takes the seat directly across from them, placing a thick leather binder on the table with a heavy thud. He does not offer a handshake or a polite greeting. He stares at them with predatory calculation, ready to spring the trap. Mitchell opens his binder and states his terms with brutal efficiency. He demands immediate unencumbered title transfer of my suburban property in exchange for the vastly inflated cash offer. Courtney does not hesitate for a single second. She reaches into Dion's briefcase, completely bypassing her husband's authority, and pulls out a crisp, official-looking document. She slides the thick parchment across the polished mahogany table directly toward Mitchell. I zoom in on the live video feed. It is a comprehensive power of attorney form. At the bottom of the page, resting on the signature line, is a flawless, meticulously executed forgery of my personal signature. Courtney clearly spent hours perfecting the loops and angles of my handwriting to secure this fraudulent transaction. Mitchell picks up the document, his face entirely unreadable. He scrutinizes the ink, holding the paper up to the light to deliberately stretch the tension in the room. He places it back on the table and leans forward, locking eyes with Courtney. He questions the absolute authenticity of the signature, stating that his international development firm requires ironclad legal guarantees before wiring millions of dollars in untraceable cash. He deliberately pokes at her fragile ego, challenging her authority and provoking the exact reaction we need. Dion visibly flinches at the direct interrogation, a bead of cold sweat forming on his forehead. He looks ready to confess right then and there. Courtney, however, takes the bait with characteristic blinding arrogance. She squares her shoulders and prepares to defend her masterpiece of deception. Courtney slams her perfectly manicured hand flat against the mahogany table. She aggressively taps a sharp fingernail directly onto the forged signature, her eyes flashing with indignant fury at Mitchell's calculated hesitation. The hidden camera button captures her every movement, every micro-expression of arrogant deceit in stunning high definition. She leans across the table, invading Mitchell's space with a chilling, manufactured confidence. "My father-in-law signed this the night before he went missing," she explicitly states, her voice ringing out clear and resonant in the quiet conference room. "It is completely legal." Those precise words echo through the digital feed into my dark garage. She does not realize she has just willingly walked into a devastating federal snare. By explicitly asserting the authenticity of a forged legal document to facilitate a multi-million-dollar interstate financial transaction, she has officially crossed the threshold from local theft to massive federal wire fraud. She is legally binding herself to a conspiracy that carries decades of mandatory prison time. Mitchell maintains his skeptical facade, allowing her to dig the hole even deeper. Courtney continues her aggressive pitch, haughtily assuring Mitchell that the local courts are completely aware of the situation and that the property transfer will face absolutely zero judicial hurdles. She weaponizes my fabricated dementia and tragic disappearance to validate the fraudulent power of attorney. Dion sits frozen beside her, a silent, terrified accomplice to his wife's spectacular legal suicide. He knows the signature is fake. He knows I did not sign away my estate the night before he left me to die in the freezing snow. Yet he says absolutely nothing, cementing his own guilt. The live recording saves securely to my encrypted hard drive, creating an indestructible, undeniable record of their spectacular criminal arrogance. Mitchell slowly nods, feigning begrudging acceptance of her aggressive legal assurances. He slides the forged document back toward his binder, but then abruptly changes the tempo of the negotiation. He looks at his expensive watch and invents a sudden catastrophic international banking delay. He informs them that due to overseas compliance regulations and the massive size of the cash transfer, the funds will be completely locked in escrow for exactly 48 hours. The money cannot be released today. The color instantly drains from Dion's face. He sweats profusely, his breathing becoming shallow and erratic as the reality of the mob deadline crashes down upon him. He stammers, attempting to protest the sudden delay, knowing the loan shark syndicate will not accept any excuses. Courtney swiftly kicks Dion under the table, silencing his rising panic with a vicious glare. She masks her own internal terror behind a rigid, terrifyingly calm smile. She clearly understands that this inflated cash offer is their absolute last chance at survival. She aggressively overrides Dion's panicked protests and forces him to accept the 48-hour hold. Mitchell agrees to finalize the transfer on Friday morning, standing up and leaving them trapped in their own agonizing desperation. The live feed cuts out as Mitchell exits the building. I turn my complete focus back to the heavy black laptop illuminating the dark garage. Friday is the exact day everything culminates. I launch a highly sophisticated, multi-layered cyber intrusion directly into the central mainframe of the government life insurance provider. Bypassing their outdated security protocols requires less than 10 minutes of focused, relentless coding. I penetrate the core financial portal and locate the specific file bearing my name and service record. The digital ledger confirms my worst suspicion. Based on the fraudulent death certificate procured by the corrupt search team, the massive $3 million payout is officially scheduled for automatic disbursement this coming Friday morning. It is programmed to drop directly into Dion's primary checking account. I highlight the receiving routing numbers. I delete Dion's banking information entirely. In its place, I input a highly classified, heavily monitored routing number connected directly to an active FBI frozen asset ledger. When the massive sum transfers on Friday, it will instantly vanish into a federal vault, triggering an immediate automatic high-level federal investigation into the receiving party. The ultimate checkmate is now locked in place. The heavy 18-wheeler grinds its massive gears, slowing down just enough as we enter the desolate, sprawling industrial district on the southern edge of Seattle. The relentless blizzard from the mountains has shifted into freezing torrential rain in the city. The terrified driver does not look at me as I push the heavy passenger door open. I step down onto the wet asphalt, pulling my stolen coat tight against the driving rain. The truck accelerates away instantly, leaving me completely swallowed by the darkness. This sector of the city is an abandoned maze of rusted warehouses, cracked pavement, and forgotten rail yards. It is the perfect place for a dead man to hide. I navigate the flooded alleyways with extreme caution. Every street lamp and intersection presents a calculated risk. I memorize the position of every rotating security camera mounted on the brick walls and chain-link fences. I time my movements perfectly, darting across the open pavement only during the brief intervals when the mechanical lenses sweep away from my position. Decades of urban surveillance training keep me entirely invisible to the digital eye. My ruined arm throbs with a dull, persistent agony, but the bleeding has stopped. I ignore the pain and push forward through the narrow, debris-filled corridors. I finally reach the dead end of a blind alley. A huge, heavily fortified auto repair shop stands before me. The windows are entirely blacked out, covered by thick iron grates. Rain hammers against the corrugated metal roof. I step up to the steel door. I raise my uninjured fist and rap my knuckles against the cold steel surface. I do not knock like a civilian seeking assistance. I strike the heavy metal using a highly specific tactical rhythm we developed during undercover narcotics operations 30 years ago. 2 fast strikes, a 3-second pause, followed by 1 heavy thud. I wait in the freezing downpour. The heavy deadbolt slides back with a loud metallic clank. The door swings open a fraction of an inch. The dark, hollow barrel of a 12-gauge shotgun emerges from the shadow, aimed directly at the center of my forehead. Mitchell stands behind the weapon, his finger resting dangerously on the hair trigger. His eyes are narrowed and intensely focused, prepared to eliminate any midnight threat. I step fully into the dim yellow light spilling from the doorway. Mitchell freezes completely. The breath leaves his lungs in a sudden sharp gasp. The heavy shotgun slips from his grip, clattering loudly against the concrete floor. He stares at me as if a phantom has just materialized on his doorstep. His shock is completely justified. The world believes I am freezing to death in a Canadian border cabin. I do not offer a warm greeting or a lengthy explanation of my miraculous survival. The situation demands immediate decisive action. I step past him into the dry, oil-stained garage. Secure the door. I command, my voice hoarse but completely steady. I need dry clothes and your secure laptop right now, Mitchell. Mitchell kicks the shotgun aside and slams the heavy steel door shut, engaging 3 separate deadbolts. He asks absolutely no questions. He owes me his life. 25 years ago, during a massive cartel shootout at the shipping docks, I took a heavy caliber bullet to the shoulder to provide the covering fire he needed to escape a lethal ambush. Our bond was forged in blood and absolute trust. He walks briskly to a metal locker and tosses me a clean gray sweatshirt and dark tactical pants. I strip off my freezing makeshift thermal wraps and slide into the dry clothing. The sudden warmth is immediate, but my internal focus remains entirely cold. Mitchell sets a rugged black laptop on a grease-stained workbench. The machine is heavily encrypted, directly linked to the regional law enforcement databases using his active consulting credentials. He steps back, offering me the keyboard. I type with rapid precision, bypassing the initial security firewalls. I pull up the active incident reports for the entire state of Washington. I type my own name into the search parameter. A red file instantly populates the dark screen. It is an official missing person report. My heart beats with a slow, calculating rhythm as I click the flashing digital folder to read the attached narrative. The initial anger has completely evaporated, replaced by a ruthless, analytical mindset. I scan the detailed paragraphs submitted by the primary complainant. The report officially classifies my sudden disappearance as a tragic, critical emergency. I read the name of the person who initiated the police protocol. The reality of the betrayal is meticulously documented in black and white text. My son has officially declared me lost to the wilderness, setting the final stage for his brutal inheritance scheme to unfold flawlessly right now, tonight. I examined the exact timestamp stamped on the digital police document. Dion filed the missing person report precisely 4 hours after he untied the aluminum boat and abandoned me at the freezing cabin. The sheer audacity of his timeline is staggering. He barely waited for the morning sun to rise before initiating his performance for the local authorities. I scroll down to the descriptive narrative section. Dion provided a lengthy, fabricated account of my mental state. The official police record claims I wandered off into the dense frozen woods during the middle of the night due to severe, untreated dementia. He painted a pitiful portrait of a confused, deeply ill old man who tragically lost his grip on reality. Courtney clearly orchestrated this narrative. Dementia provides the perfect, unquestionable excuse for my sudden disappearance in a hostile environment. It prevents the local detectives from looking for any signs of a struggle or foul play. The police are currently organizing a standard rescue operation for a vulnerable senior citizen, completely unaware they are participating in a calculated murder plot. I commit every single solitary detail of his totally fabricated statement to memory, forging it into a deadly weapon for later use. Mitchell reaches over my shoulder and taps a thick finger against a flashing yellow alert located in the upper right corner of the computer monitor. The regional database highlights a critical update regarding the active case file. My eyes track across the newly uploaded legal attachment. Dion and Courtney just filed an emergency court petition in the civil division to seize immediate unilateral control of my entire estate. They are citing my alleged severe dementia and highly probable death as legal grounds for an expedited transfer of assets. They are not waiting for a confirmed body recovery or a standard waiting period. Their greed is accelerating their timeline beyond conventional boundaries. The attached schedule reveals their ultimate intention. They are rapidly moving to liquidate every single financial asset, property, and bank account in my name by this coming Friday. The legal machinery is already turning in their favor, completely unchecked by any opposing force. They believe they have successfully executed the perfect crime and are currently racing to collect their massive payout. I close the secure digital folder with intense finality. The hunt has just evolved from sheer physical survival into a highly sophisticated war to protect my life legacy. The digital clock on the wall of the 40th floor conference room ticks silently toward 10 in the morning. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer a panoramic view of the Seattle skyline, a stark contrast to the dark, freezing Canadian wilderness where I was supposed to rot. Dion and Courtney sit side by side at the center of the massive glass table. They are dressed impeccably, projecting the polished image of a grieving but resilient couple ready to move forward. Their expensive corporate lawyer sits adjacent to them, organizing thick stacks of legal documents into precise piles. The atmosphere in the room crackles with a suffocating, greedy tension. Courtney repeatedly checks her diamond-encrusted watch. She is mentally tracking the exact timeline she promised the underground loan shark syndicate just 24 hours earlier. The massive $3 million federal life insurance payout and the heavily inflated cash wire from the fraudulent house sale are scheduled to drop into their primary accounts at any second. They believe they have successfully executed the perfect crime. They murdered a father, fabricated a tragic accident, and manipulated the federal government without facing a single consequence. Courtney shifts in her leather chair, her posture rigid with desperate anticipation. The heavy mob debt hanging over her neck is minutes away from being entirely erased. Dion stares blankly at the polished glass table, entirely consumed by the imminent arrival of a fortune built on my frozen corpse. The trap is perfectly primed and waiting for the final trigger. The corporate lawyer clears his throat, breaking the heavy silence in the pristine room. He slides a thick blue folder across the smooth glass surface, directly toward Dion. These are the final release forms required to officially close the estate transfer and authorize the immediate disbursement of the federal life insurance funds. The lawyer formally explains that once these documents are signed and notarized, the $3 million will instantly route into their joint account, followed immediately by the cash from the expedited property sale. Courtney leans forward, her eyes locked onto the black ink pen resting beside the folder. She subtly nudges Dion under the table, a silent, vicious command to finish the job. Dion reaches out and picks up the heavy metal pen. I watch through the concealed security feed Mitchell hacked into earlier this morning. I look closely at my son's hand. His fingers wrap around the silver barrel. His hand does not shake. There is absolutely no hesitation, no lingering guilt, and zero remorse for the father he left to freeze to death in a remote cabin. He positions the pen over the signature line. In this singular defining moment, Dion completely severs his final tie to his own family. He has entirely abandoned his basic humanity, trading his soul and his father's life for a massive, unearned paycheck. He presses the pen tip against the thick paper, entirely ready to commit massive federal wire fraud to save his cowardly existence. Before the black ink can mark the pristine legal document, the heavy mahogany double doors of the conference room crash open with deafening violent force. The heavy wood slams hard against the drywall, shattering the quiet corporate atmosphere instantly. I stride directly into the center of the room. I am not the frail, dementia-ridden old man they fabricated in their pathetic police reports. I am wearing a sharp, tailored black suit, standing tall and radiating absolute, undeniable authority. My eyes lock directly onto my son. I am a ghost resurrected from the ice, stepping fully into the harsh morning light to reclaim my stolen life. Mitchell enters the room exactly 1 second behind me, his massive frame blocking the primary exit route. He is immediately followed by 3 heavily armed federal agents wearing dark windbreakers with the FBI insignia emblazoned across their chests in bright yellow lettering. The federal agents fan out with practiced, lethal precision, instantly securing the perimeter of the conference room. They place their hands firmly over their holstered sidearms, establishing absolute tactical control over the enclosed environment. The corporate lawyer jumps up from his leather chair in complete shock, aggressively demanding an explanation for the sudden federal intrusion into his private legal proceedings. The lead FBI agent flashes a gold badge, silencing the lawyer with a single sharp command to step away from the table. The air in the room turns instantly to ice. The flawless millionaire fantasy Courtney meticulously built over the past 2 weeks evaporates into thin air. I stand at the head of the glass table, a living, breathing testament to their spectacular failure. The hunt has finally brought me directly to my targets. The heavy silver pen slips from Dion's fingers, hitting the glass table with a sharp, echoing clatter. He stares at me, his eyes stretched wide in absolute, unadulterated terror. The color drains entirely from his face, leaving his skin a sickly, ashen gray. He grips the sharp edge of the conference table so tightly his knuckles turn pure white. He opens his mouth to speak, but only a pathetic, broken stammer escapes his lips. His brain completely short-circuits, entirely unable to process the physical reality of my survival. Beside him, Courtney stops breathing completely. Her flawless, arrogant mask shatters into a million jagged pieces. She stares at the 3 armed federal agents securing the doors, instantly realizing that her elaborate scheme to defraud the government and pay off her violent mob debt has just collided with a catastrophic brick wall. The undeniable presence of the FBI confirms her worst possible nightmare. The underground loan shark syndicate will not receive their $2 million today. They are going to hunt her down, and she has nowhere left to run. Her chest heaves in a sudden violent panic attack. I walk slowly around the perimeter of the glass table, my footsteps completely silent on the thick corporate carpet. The federal agents maintain their rigid perimeter, allowing me absolute control over the confrontation. I pull out a heavy leather chair and sit directly across from the 2 people who meticulously plotted my brutal murder. I do not raise my voice. I do not display a single ounce of the crushing anger I felt freezing in that dark Canadian cabin. I lean forward, folding my hands neatly on top of the pristine legal documents they were about to sign. I look deeply into Dion's terrified, watering eyes. He shrinks back into his seat, desperately trying to escape the heavy weight of my gaze. There is no fatherly affection left inside me. The man sitting across from him is purely a detective executing a flawless tactical takedown. "Hello, Dion," I say, my voice completely flat and entirely devoid of any human warmth. The chilling sound of my voice cuts through his rising panic like a razor blade. The fishing trip is over. The absolute silence in the 40th floor conference room stretches into an agonizing eternity. The high-priced corporate lawyer stands frozen against the mahogany wall, entirely unsure of how to process the sudden invasion of armed federal agents. Dion remains cemented to his leather chair. His lungs refuse to draw air. His eyes dart wildly between the FBI windbreakers and my face trapped in a waking nightmare. He looks at me as if I am a reanimated corpse crawling out of a frozen grave to drag him straight to hell. Courtney is the first to shatter the paralyzing shock. Her survival instinct overrides her initial terror, forcing her into a desperate, sickeningly sweet performance. She blinks rapidly, forcing fake tears to well up in her eyes as she scrambles to reconstruct her shattered mask. She pushes her chair back, ignoring the federal agents entirely, and takes a frantic step toward me with her arms outstretched. She molds her face into an expression of profound, overwhelming relief. "Dad, thank God you are alive," she cries out, her voice trembling with manufactured hysteria. "We searched absolutely everywhere for you. The local police told us you wandered out into the deep snow. We have been completely beside ourselves with grief." She reaches out to embrace me, attempting to physically sell the illusion of a devoted, loving daughter-in-law overjoyed by a miraculous rescue. Her sheer audacity is a masterclass in sociopathic manipulation. I do not flinch. I simply raise my right hand, stopping her dead in her tracks before her manicured fingers can touch my suit. I ignore her pathetic display of fabricated relief entirely. My gaze remains locked with absolute, unwavering intensity on my son. I reach into my interior jacket pocket and pull out a sleek black digital tablet. I drop the heavy device squarely onto the center of the polished glass table. The sharp crack of the metal casing striking the glass echoes loudly across the room. I tap the screen once. The high-definition audio file we recorded begins to play at maximum volume. Courtney's own voice fills the pristine corporate environment, sharp and ruthlessly calculating. The recording captures them explicitly discussing the exact moment Dion swapped my vital blood pressure medication for worthless peppermint candies. The audio playback details their exact plan to abandon me in the sub-zero Canadian wilderness to freeze to death without a trace. Every brutal, premeditated step of their murder plot is laid bare for everyone in the room to hear. Courtney halts mid-step. The fake joyful tears instantly evaporate from her perfectly powdered face. Her manufactured smile flatlines into a grimace of pure, unadulterated horror. She stares at the black tablet as if it is a live explosive device. The undeniable sound of her own voice discussing premeditated murder completely annihilates her carefully constructed facade. She slowly backs away, bumping into the edge of the conference table entirely out of lies. The lead FBI agent steps forward, effectively cutting off any potential escape route. He reaches inside his dark, tactical windbreaker and retrieves a thick stack of official legal documents. He tosses the heavy paperwork directly onto the glass table right next to my tablet and their fabricated power of attorney. The papers slide to a halt, inches from Dion's trembling hands. The agent reads the charges aloud with cold, mechanical precision. The arrest warrants outline a devastating catalog of severe federal offenses: conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, aggravated mail and wire fraud, massive insurance fraud against a federal entity, interstate forgery of legal documents, Each individual charge carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years in a federal penitentiary. The agent explicitly states that the forged signature on the power of attorney they just presented constitutes the final irrefutable act of federal wire fraud. The trap has snapped completely shut, securing them in an ironclad legal cage built by their own blinding greed. Dion stares at the terrifying stack of federal warrants. The full crushing weight of his reality finally breaks his weak psychological spine. He does not try to maintain his composure or formulate a clever legal defense. He instantly collapses forward, burying his face in his hands. A loud, pathetic sob tears through his throat. He begins to weep uncontrollably, his shoulders shaking violently as the absolute certainty of decades behind steel bars consumes him entirely. His polished exterior disintegrates, revealing the terrified, cowardly little boy he has always been. He knows there is absolutely no loophole, no clever lawyer trick, and no amount of money that can magically save him from the devastating consequences of his own calculated actions. The sheer terror of federal prison completely overrides any remaining loyalty Dion holds for his wife. He snaps his head up, his face slick with tears and sweat. He violently shoves his leather chair backward and points a trembling accusatory finger directly at Courtney. He scrambles to save himself by throwing her directly into the line of fire. "It was her idea," Dion screams, his voice cracking with panicked desperation. "I never wanted to hurt you, Dad. She forced me to do it. She owed $2 million to an underground mob syndicate." He looks frantically at the federal agents, practically begging for a shred of mercy. He continues his rapid-fire confession, desperate to shift the entire burden of guilt away from his own shoulders. "The loan sharks were threatening to kill us. She forced me to sign the debt, and she forced me to take you to the cabin. She made me cut the dispatch radio wire so you could not call for a rescue." He is spilling every dark secret they share, completely dismantling their criminal partnership in a pathetic bid for a plea deal. Courtney's shock instantly ignites into pure venomous fury. The polished elite socialite vanishes, entirely replaced by a cornered vicious animal. She lunges toward Dion, her perfectly manicured hands curling into claws. "You pathetic coward!" she shrieks, her voice echoing violently off the glass walls. "Do not dare try to pin this entirely on me. You are the one who physically swapped his blood pressure pills. You left him to die in the snow because you wanted the inheritance just as badly as I did." The so-called unbreakable unity of the conspirators shatters into a million jagged pieces right in front of my eyes. They turn on each other with absolute savagery, screaming vicious accusations and detailing their mutual involvement in the murder plot. They tear each other apart in front of the federal agents, completely destroying any chance of a unified legal defense. Mitchell stands by the door with a grim smile of satisfaction. I sit perfectly still, watching the glorious, chaotic implosion of their toxic marriage. The trap worked flawlessly. They are actively feeding each other to the federal wolves, digging their own graves deeper with every single word they scream. The heavy mahogany doors swing open for a second time, cutting through the vicious, echoing screams of the imploding couple. A tall, sharply dressed man in a tailored gray suit steps into the conference room. He is the underground loan shark, the apex predator of the local syndicate they desperately feared. However, he does not arrive with armed enforcers. He is flanked by two seasoned city detectives, men I worked alongside during my undercover narcotics days. They stand beside him not as captors but as escorts in this highly choreographed takedown. The loan shark surveys the room with cold reptilian detachment, his eyes immediately locking onto Courtney. He steps forward, entirely ignoring the chaotic weeping of my son. Courtney gasps, stumbling backward until her spine violently hits the soundproof glass wall. The last remnants of her engineered reality crumble into dust. She realizes with absolute, horrifying clarity that the very monster she tried to pay off with my blood money is now actively working with the federal agents and her supposedly dead father-in-law. The impenetrable legal cage has completely sealed shut around her. There are no more invisible exits, no more manipulative lies to spin, and absolutely nowhere left to hide. The loan shark casually buttons his gray suit jacket, enjoying the raw, unadulterated terror radiating from the woman who tried to play him for a fool. The room falls into a suffocating silence, pregnant with the crushing weight of their inescapable doom. The loan shark reaches into his tailored jacket and withdraws a thick manila dossier. He tosses it onto the glass table, the heavy thud sounding like a judge's gavel. He looks directly at Dion, his voice dripping with absolute contempt. He explains that Courtney never intended to pay off the syndicate debt. The dossier contains highly detailed, undeniable financial records exposing a series of encrypted offshore bank transfers. Courtney had secretly set up an untraceable account in the Cayman Islands weeks ago. She meticulously arranged to route the entire $3 million life insurance payout directly into that hidden ledger the moment it cleared escrow. She had a one-way first-class ticket to Paris booked for tomorrow morning. She intended to vanish across the Atlantic with every single penny, leaving Dion to face the brutal wrath of the underground syndicate completely empty-handed. The loan shark states plainly that she planned to offer her own husband up as a sacrificial lamb. She viewed his inevitable murder by the syndicate as the perfect distraction to ensure her clean getaway. She orchestrated the entire timeline to maximize her personal profit while systematically eliminating every single person who stood in her path. The financial documents perfectly map out her absolute calculated treachery. She did not just plot to kill me for the inheritance. She actively orchestrated the gruesome execution of her own husband to guarantee her luxurious blood-soaked freedom. Dion stares blankly at the scattered offshore banking documents. His bloodshot eyes slowly rise from the undeniable proof of his wife's ultimate betrayal and lock onto her face. The devastating reality completely breaks his mind. He abandoned the father who raised him, fed him, and protected him for decades, leaving me to freeze to death in a desolate blizzard. He traded his soul, his humanity, and his family entirely for a woman who viewed him as nothing more than disposable meat. He was simply another pawn on her sociopathic chessboard, a convenient idiot meant to absorb the lethal consequences of her staggering greed. He falls to his knees, clutching his chest as he dry heaves violently, physically sickened by his own catastrophic stupidity. Courtney realizes the game is definitively over. With her escape route destroyed and her manipulated husband completely broken, her polished elite socialite mask burns away entirely. She erupts in a blinding, hysterical fury. Her face contorts into a hideous mask of pure rage. She lunges against the restraints of the federal agents, screaming a torrent of vile, abhorrent racist slurs directly at me. The venom she kept hidden behind tight smiles at family dinners explodes into the open. She curses my existence, my skin color, and the very air I breathe, utterly unable to comprehend how an arrogant white supremacist elitist like herself was comprehensively outsmarted by the man she considered inherently inferior. Her hateful, bigoted superiority complex is pulverized by the sheer magnitude of her absolute, humiliating defeat. The FBI agents forcefully grab her arms, restraining her violent thrashing as she continues to spit toxic, bigoted venom into the sterile corporate air. Her pathetic superiority has become the instrument of her total destruction. The federal agents aggressively twist Courtney's arms behind her back, the sharp metallic clicking of heavy steel handcuffs echoing loudly through the room. They force her down into a chair, neutralizing her violent racist tirade with sheer physical authority. I watch her thrash against the cold steel, her face purple with unfiltered rage. I stand up slowly from the glass table, taking my time. I meticulously adjust the pristine cuffs of my tailored black suit, exuding an aura of absolute unbreakable calm. I walk around the table until I am standing directly over her. I lean down, forcing her to look into the eyes of the man she tried to discard. Before you rot in a federal cell for the next 3 decades, there is one final detail you need to clearly understand, I say, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You believed I was a pathetic, penniless old man, but you are completely unaware of the vast commercial trust my late wife and I built. I secretly own the massive commercial plaza located precisely in the center of the downtown shopping district, the exact same building where your bankrupt fashion boutique currently operates. I reach into my interior jacket pocket one final time. I pull out a single crisp legal document bearing the official seal of my blind trust. I slide the paper across the polished glass table, stopping it right beneath her restrained hands. She stares at the bold black lettering with wide, uncomprehending eyes. I terminated your commercial lease. Exactly at 8 o'clock this morning, I state every word, striking her like a physical blow. My private security teams have already completely cleared out your pathetic inventory and permanently locked the storefront. You spent the last 3 years funding your elitist lifestyle inside a building I personally own, paying rent directly into my hidden accounts while mocking my supposed financial fragility. You are not just going to federal prison for murder and fraud. You are officially, undeniably bankrupt and utterly homeless. The total destruction of her material world shatters whatever fragmented sanity she had left. She begins to wail, a high-pitched guttural sound of pure agony. The FBI agents haul her up from the chair, dragging her toward the heavy double doors. I watched them haul her away, my stolen life entirely reclaimed. The heavy mahogany doors swing shut, cutting off Courtney's hysterical screams as she is hauled down the corridor. Her furious protests fade into a pathetic, muffled echo before vanishing entirely into the corporate hallways. The sudden silence in the 40th floor conference room is absolute and suffocating. The chaotic energy of her explosive arrest dissipates, leaving a stark, undeniable reality in its wake. The high-priced corporate lawyer has already fled the room, terrified of being implicated in a massive federal conspiracy. Only 3 men remain inside the expansive glass-walled space. Mitchell stands firmly by the exit, his massive arms crossed over his chest, his posture radiating a silent, immovable threat. I stand at the head of the polished glass table, my tailored suit immaculate, my breathing perfectly controlled. In the center of the floor, completely stripped of his arrogant facade and his manipulative wife, is my son. Dayon physically crumbles. His legs can no longer support the crushing weight of his impending doom. He drops heavily to his knees. The sharp impact of his kneecaps hitting the expensive corporate carpet produces a dull thud. He is entirely alone now. The violent mob syndicate wants his head on a spike. The federal government has an ironclad, undeniable case against him. The $3 million insurance payout is permanently locked inside an FBI vault. His entire existence has been reduced to ash in a matter of minutes. He kneels amidst the scattered legal documents and offshore banking dossiers, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his own catastrophic destruction. A ragged, pathetic sob escapes Dion's throat. He lowers his hands from his face, revealing eyes completely bloodshot and swollen with absolute terror. He begins to crawl across the floor. He drags himself over the thick carpet like a wounded animal, entirely abandoning whatever shred of dignity he had left. His expensive designer suit wrinkles and bunches around his knees as he shuffles forward. Saliva and tears mix on his chin. He reaches out with trembling hands, aiming for the hem of my trousers. "Dad, please," he begs, his voice breaking into a high, hysterical whine. "You have to help me. You have to stop them from taking me away." He gasps for air, choking on his own rising panic. "It was a terrible mistake. I never wanted any of this to happen. I was manipulated. Courtney poisoned my mind and forced me into a corner with her massive debts. You know I am not a killer. You raised me better than this." He inches closer, his chest heaving with violent sobs. "I am your son. I am your own flesh and blood. You cannot let them lock me away in a federal cage for the rest of my life. I will do anything you want. Please, Dad. Show me mercy. I am begging you to remember who I am." He uses the exact emotional weapon he assumes will shatter my resolve. He banks his entire survival on the biological tie between a father and his child, desperately hoping my paternal instinct is stronger than my desire for justice. I look down at the pathetic weeping man groveling on the floor. I search my heart for a single flicker of compassion, a solitary spark of the profound love I carried for 35 years. I find absolutely nothing. The internal vault where my paternal affection used to reside is completely empty, scoured clean by the brutal reality of his actions. I do not see the little boy I taught to ride a bicycle. I do not see the teenager I proudly sent to college. I only see the ruthless predator who stared me directly in the eye while my heart seized in my chest. As Dion cries, my mind violently transports me back to that remote Canadian cabin. I vividly remember the agonizing, crushing pressure radiating through my ribcage. I feel the suffocating shortness of breath as my vital organs began to fail. I remember the bitter biting cold of the blizzard blowing through the shattered window, freezing the blood in my veins. I remember lying on the frozen wooden floorboards, staring out into the blinding white storm, entirely convinced my life was ending. I remember the massive timber wolf stepping out of the tree line, its golden eyes assessing my dying body. In that desolate, frozen wasteland, I realized the ultimate truth. The real monster was not the wild predator stalking the perimeter of the cabin. The real monster was the man who deliberately swapped my life-saving medication for useless peppermint candies. Dion did not simply make a poor judgment call under pressure. He meticulously engineered a scenario where I would die a slow, agonizing, terrifying death entirely alone. Any remnant of a father's love froze solid and shattered into dust the moment I heard his boat engine fade into the distance. I stand perfectly rigid, staring down at his tear-soaked face. A mistake is forgetting to call on a birthday. I state, my voice dropping to a glacial, uncompromising register. The sheer coldness of my tone instantly silences his hysterical sobbing. A mistake is a bad financial investment or a momentary lapse in judgment. Swapping my prescribed heart medication for cheap mints is not a mistake. I take a slow, deliberate step forward, forcing him to look directly into my eyes. Driving me hundreds of miles into a foreign wilderness during a severe winter storm is not a mistake. Sabotaging the emergency radio and abandoning me on the floor of a freezing cabin while my heart actively failed is not a mistake. That is highly premeditated, cold-blooded attempted murder. I watch the realization crash into his eyes. He finally understands that his pathetic performance is completely useless. The emotional manipulation tactics that worked on me for decades have zero power here. You did not leave a father in that cabin, I tell him, my words slicing through the air with lethal precision. You left a target, and you completely failed to confirm the kill. Dion lunges forward with a sudden, desperate burst of energy, his hands grasping wildly for my polished leather shoes. I take a sharp step backward, completely refusing to let his treacherous fingers physically touch me. The absolute rejection hits him harder than a physical blow. He slumps onto the corporate carpet, a hollow, broken shell of a man entirely devoid of hope. I raise my head and deliver a single sharp nod to the two federal agents waiting silently by the doorway. They move with immediate, brutal efficiency. They haul Dion up from the floor by his armpits, roughly twisting his wrists behind his back. The heavy steel handcuffs, ratcheting closed, sound like a final unbreakable lock sealing his absolute fate. They drag him out of the conference room. He does not scream or fight. He simply stares at the floor, marching blindly toward decades of federal incarceration. Mitchell steps forward and places a fresh, neatly typed legal document on the glass table. It is a comprehensive disinheritance clause drafted specifically by my private attorneys. It permanently severs every financial, legal, and familial tie between Dion and my estate. I pick up the heavy metal pen Dion dropped earlier. With a steady, unyielding hand, I sign my authentic signature on the bottom line. The bloodline is officially severed. Exactly 7 days pass before the absolute magnitude of the conspiracy breaches the public domain. The morning news cycles across the entire Pacific Northwest are completely dominated by a single explosive headline. The glowing banners at the bottom of every television screen read, "Son and daughter-in-law arrested in plot to murder decorated police veteran." The media feeding frenzy is instantaneous and merciless. Investigative journalists dig eagerly into the salacious details of the foiled assassination, broadcasting the audio recordings Mitchell conveniently leaked to a trusted contact in the press. The citizens of Seattle listen in absolute horror as Courtney and Dion casually discuss leaving a respected community servant to freeze to death in the Canadian wilderness. The sheer sociopathic cruelty of the act sparks a massive wave of public outrage. My face, pulled from old department commendation files, is plastered across front pages next to the mugshots of the two conspirators. Dion looks completely broken, his eyes red and vacant, stripped of his tailored suits and forced into a harsh orange jumpsuit. Courtney stares into the booking camera with a hollow defensive glare, her designer makeup scrubbed away to reveal the cold predator underneath. The narrative of the devoted son and the elite fashion boutique owner is entirely replaced by the sickening reality of their greed. True crime podcasts and news anchors dissect every financial maneuver, marveling at the staggering hubris required to execute such a flawed, malicious scheme against a veteran detective. The brutal public backlash instantly triggers a catastrophic shockwave through Courtney's elite social circles. Her wealthy, highly influential family recognizes the immense danger the scandal poses to their own lucrative corporate empire. They do not hesitate to protect their assets. Within 48 hours of the arrest, her father's public relations firm launches a massive, heavily funded campaign of deliberate distancing. They issue a cold, legally sterile press release to every major news outlet, officially condemning the abhorrent actions of their daughter and expressing their deepest sympathies to my family. They explicitly state that Courtney has been permanently removed from all family trusts and corporate boards. They publicly disown her to salvage their own pristine reputation from the toxic fallout of her federal indictment. Courtney's carefully curated socialite status is ground entirely into dust. The country club memberships are immediately revoked. The elite fashion magazines that once featured her boutique publish scathing editorials about her criminal arrogance. Her wealthy friends and influential contacts block her numbers, severing all ties to avoid being infected by the legal radiation. Sitting in her sterile federal holding cell, Courtney discovers the ultimate bitter truth of her existence. The high society she worshipped and killed for operates on the exact same ruthless transactional logic she used against me. The moment she became a social and financial liability, they discarded her with the exact same merciless efficiency she employed when she swapped my heart medication for candy. The crushing weight of the federal indictment rapidly forces Dion's defense strategy into sheer desperation. Late on Thursday afternoon, my secure phone vibrates on the garage workbench. The caller ID displays the name of a high-profile, incredibly expensive criminal defense attorney. I accept the call, placing the device on speakerphone without offering a greeting. The lawyer launches into a frantic, highly rehearsed monologue. He speaks with a practiced, synthetic empathy, attempting to bridge the impossible chasm between a murdered father and his treacherous son. He begs me to consider the extreme psychological manipulation Dion supposedly suffered under Courtney's domineering influence. The attorney paints a pathetic picture of a weak, misguided boy trapped by the terrifying threats of a violent underground mob syndicate. He claims Dion is deeply, profoundly remorseful and is currently suffering severe emotional breakdowns in his isolation cell. The lawyer then makes his ultimate, desperate pitch. He asks me to submit a formal statement of forgiveness to the federal judge. He pleads for me to ask the court for extreme leniency, arguing that a public display of paternal grace could drastically reduce Dion's mandatory prison sentence from 3 decades down to a manageable 5 years. He practically promises that Dion will spend the rest of his life making amends if I just grant him this one final lifeline. I sit in the dimly lit garage, listening to the entire pathetic plea in absolute silence. I do not interrupt his carefully scripted emotional blackmail. I let him expend all his legal ammunition, listening as his confident tone gradually falters against the impenetrable wall of my quiet resolve. He is asking me to resurrect a fatherly bond that was permanently shattered in the freezing Canadian snow. The defense attorney finally stops talking, the heavy silence stretching through the digital connection. He waits anxiously for any sign of hesitation or mercy. I stare at the concrete wall of the garage, feeling absolutely nothing for the man trembling in a federal holding cell. I lean closely toward the microphone on the workbench. My statement will be delivered under oath at the sentencing hearing. I reply, my voice completely devoid of emotion or compromise. You can tell your client to prepare for the maximum penalty. I reach forward and firmly press the end call button, instantly terminating the connection. There will be absolutely no leniency, no backroom deals, and no unearned forgiveness. Dion made a conscious, calculated decision to participate in my execution for a $3 million payout. He actively chose his path when he cut the radio wire and walked out the cabin door. Now he must face the unmitigated, crushing consequences of that choice. I slide the phone across the metal table, entirely at peace with the permanent destruction of our relationship. Barely an hour after the defense attorney's failed ambush, the heavy steel door of the garage rattles with a sharp, authoritative knock. Mitchell opens the reinforced door to admit the lead federal prosecutor assigned to the conspiracy case. The prosecutor walks into the garage carrying a thick leather briefcase. He bypasses all polite small talk and immediately outlines the latest development in the legal battlefield. He informs me that Courtney's high-priced legal team is actively shifting their defense strategy. Realizing that the audio recordings and forged documents make a plea of innocence completely impossible, they intend to claim temporary insanity. Her lawyers are preparing to argue that the severe immediate threats of violence from the underground loan shark syndicate caused a total psychological break, forcing her into a state of sheer survival panic. They want to portray her as a victim of extreme mob extortion who simply lost her mind to preserve her own life. The prosecutor warns me that a highly sympathetic jury might potentially fall for the manipulative narrative. I listen carefully, absorbing the new tactical threat. I slowly nod, pulling my encrypted laptop toward the center of the workbench. I am fully prepared to launch a devastating counterstrike to obliterate her final lie. The heavy oak doors of the federal courthouse swing shut, sealing the packed gallery inside the cavernous room. Every wooden bench is filled to absolute capacity. Local journalists, true crime bloggers, and outraged citizens practically overflow into the aisles, eager to witness the final destruction of the elitist socialite who tried to murder a decorated veteran. I sit perfectly still in the very front row, wearing my darkest tailored suit. My expression remains entirely stoic and impenetrable, a carefully constructed fortress of absolute control. I do not offer a single glance of sympathy to the defense table. The heavy metal chain attached to her wrists rattles loudly as Courtney shuffles into the courtroom. The transformation is brutally stark. The flawless, arrogant boutique owner who mocked my supposed financial fragility at family dinners has been entirely erased. She wears an oversized, coarse orange prison uniform that hangs loosely off her suddenly gaunt frame. Her perfectly manicured blonde hair is now dull and pulled back into a messy knot. Her skin lacks any trace of the expensive cosmetics she once used to project her innate superiority. She looks physically hollowed out by the sheer terror of federal incarceration and the total abandonment by her wealthy family. She deliberately avoids looking in my direction, staring intensely at the scarred wooden table in front of her. The crushing reality of her absolute isolation radiates through her rigid posture. She is entirely alone, preparing to face the catastrophic consequences of her monumental greed. The presiding federal judge strikes his gavel, immediately demanding order in the tense courtroom. Courtney's high-priced defense attorney stands up, adjusting his silk tie with a practiced theatrical flourish. He completely abandons their previous strategy of claiming temporary insanity caused by mob threats, realizing the audio evidence makes that angle entirely implausible. Instead, he pivots to a desperate, highly aggressive smear campaign against his client's own husband. He paces back and forth in front of the jury box, delivering a deeply passionate, entirely fabricated opening statement. He attempts to paint Courtney as a tragically naive victim of severe domestic manipulation. He points an accusatory finger toward the empty chair where Dion would normally sit, loudly claiming that the son orchestrated the entire murder plot entirely on his own. The lawyer weaves a completely fictional narrative of deep-seated, long-standing childhood resentments. He tells the jury that Dion secretly hated his father for decades, harboring a dark, violent grudge that finally exploded into a homicidal inheritance scheme. According to this highly paid professional liar, Courtney was merely a terrified, submissive wife forced into compliance by an abusive husband. He claims she had absolutely no knowledge of the medication swap and was entirely paralyzed by fear during the trip to the Canadian cabin. I listened to the outrageous fiction without moving a single muscle. The attorney practically begs the jury to look at her gaunt, weeping figure and see an innocent hostage rather than a cold-blooded apex predator. The federal prosecutor rises from his seat the exact moment the defense attorney finishes his pathetic fairy tale. He does not waste time with dramatic pacing or emotional appeals to the jury. He operates with the brutal clinical efficiency of a surgeon excising a tumor. He immediately calls Mitchell to the witness stand. My old tactical partner walks forward with a heavy, purposeful stride, taking the oath with absolute seriousness. The prosecutor establishes Mitchell's credentials and his direct involvement in securing the surveillance evidence. He then requests permission to submit a specific audio file into the official court record. The judge grants the motion. The prosecutor connects a digital drive to the courtroom audio system. He explicitly states that this unedited surveillance recording was captured entirely legally in a public parking lot just days before the arrests. He presses a button on his laptop. A sharp burst of static crackles through the high-definition speakers mounted around the room, followed immediately by Courtney's unmistakable, haughty voice. The recording is absolutely flawless. Her cold, calculated tone completely shatters the silent courtroom, entirely destroying the fragile illusion of the terrified hostage. The jury listens in stunned silence as Courtney explicitly outlines the medication swap to her underground loan shark contact. They hear her brag about the genius of replacing my life-saving pills with cheap peppermint candies. They hear her detail the exact timeline of the Canadian cabin trip, laughing at how easily she manipulated her cowardly husband into executing the physical drop. The audio continues, revealing her absolute intention to steal the $3 million life insurance payout and instantly board a first-class flight to Paris. She explicitly mocks Dion's weakness, stating she fully intended to leave him behind to face the violent mob syndicate alone. Her own arrogant words seal her fate. The recording clicks off, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence hanging in the cavernous courtroom. Courtney's high-priced defense lawyer slowly sinks back into his leather chair, completely paralyzed. He stops talking entirely. He does not attempt to raise a single objection. The undeniable reality of the audio file has instantly vaporized his entire legal strategy. He stares at his legal pad, profoundly aware that the case is catastrophically lost. The 12 members of the jury turn their heads in unison, staring directly at the defense table. There is absolutely no sympathy left in their eyes. They look at Courtney with absolute, unfiltered disgust. The meticulously crafted narrative of the innocent, manipulated victim is completely obliterated. They do not see a terrified wife acting under duress. They see a calculating, remorseless sociopath who actively orchestrated the brutal murder of a decorated veteran and planned to sacrifice her own husband to secure a bloody fortune. Courtney shrinks down into her oversized prison uniform, burying her face in her hands as the sheer weight of public revulsion crashes down upon her. Her arrogant superiority is finally broken. The prosecutor does not allow the jury a single moment to recover from the audio revelation. He immediately moves to deliver the final inescapable death blow to her defense. He walks briskly to the evidence table and picks up a small transparent evidence bag sealed with bright red tape. He holds it high in the air for the entire courtroom to observe. Inside the plastic bag is the small, unremarkable plastic mint bottle recovered directly from my gear bag at the frozen Canadian cabin. He formally submits the bottle as definitive physical evidence. He then calls the lead federal forensic analyst to the stand. The analyst speaks with absolute, unquestionable scientific authority. She confirms to the jury that the laboratory conducted an extensive microscopic fingerprint analysis on the plastic container and its twist cap. The results are scientifically undeniable. Dion's prints are completely absent. The only fingerprints identified on the cap, the specific fingerprints matching the individual who physically opened the bottle to dump out my heart medication and insert the peppermint candies, belong entirely and exclusively to Courtney. The final lie evaporates. Checkmate. The crushing finality of the forensic testimony leaves absolutely no room for cross-examination. The defense attorney rests his case without calling a single additional witness, entirely broken by the sheer weight of the biometric evidence. The judge formally hands the case over to the jury. They file out of the courtroom, their faces locked in grim masks of unified disgust. I remain seated in the front row, perfectly still, while the heavy oak doors click shut behind them. I do not pace the corridors or seek out Mitchell for reassurance. I simply wait. The deliberation takes exactly 2 hours and 47 minutes. It is a stunningly rapid turnaround for a complex federal conspiracy trial, signaling an absolute lack of doubt among the 12 men and women making the decision. The bailiff announces their return. The heavy doors swing open. The jury members march back to their designated seats, their posture rigid and unyielding. The sprawling, cavernous courtroom falls into a dead, suffocating silence. Even the aggressive journalists in the back rows stop typing. You can hear the hum of the air conditioning unit and the frantic, shallow breathing of the two defendants seated at their respective tables. Courtney looks entirely gaunt, her skin practically translucent against the harsh fabric of her orange prison uniform. She grips the edge of the wooden table so tightly her knuckles turn completely white. The judge leans forward, resting his hands on the high mahogany bench. He looks directly at the jury foreman and asks for the verdict. The jury foreman stands up, unfolding a crisp white sheet of paper with mechanical precision. He does not look toward the defense tables. He looks directly at the judge. The foreman reads the decisions with a loud, unwavering voice. On the charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, guilty. On the charge of massive federal wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of aggravated elder abuse, guilty. The word echoes through the silent courtroom like a recurring gunshot, striking the defendants repeatedly. Courtney's entire skeletal frame gives way. She collapses forward onto the scarred wooden defense table. A harsh, guttural wail tears from her throat, a sound completely stripped of her former elite arrogance. It is the raw, ugly noise of a trapped animal realizing the cage is permanently locked. Her high-priced lawyer does not even attempt to comfort her. He merely shifts his chair slightly away from her thrashing body, silently severing his association with a convicted federal felon. Dion sits at the adjacent table, completely motionless. He does not weep or cry out. He simply stares blankly at the blank beige wall directly in front of him. His mind has clearly snapped under the crushing gravity of the verdicts. He is a hollow vessel entirely emptied of his fraudulent pride and his manipulative wife. He realizes that every single bridge he burned, every lie he told, and every deadly choice he made has led him directly to a concrete cell. The trap is completely sealed. The presiding judge bangs his heavy wooden gavel, slicing through Courtney's pathetic wailing. He demands absolute silence and commands the defendants to stand for sentencing. The federal marshals violently haul Courtney to her feet. Dion rises mechanically, his eyes still dead and vacant. The judge peers over his glasses, his face radiating pure judicial fury. He delivers a scathing, relentless lecture that dissects their entire existence. He explicitly condemns their actions as the absolute prime example of monstrous, unmitigated greed. He addresses Courtney directly, dismantling her sociopathic superiority. He states that her calculated willingness to orchestrate a brutal execution and discard her own husband for a European getaway is a level of moral bankruptcy rarely seen in his courtroom. He then turns his piercing gaze to Dion. The judge specifically reprimands him for committing the ultimate betrayal against the father who raised, protected, and funded him for decades. He calls Dion a cowardly, pathetic shell of a man who traded his fundamental humanity for a fraction of an inheritance. The judge reaches for his pen. He sentences Courtney to 25 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. He then sentences Dion to 20 years behind steel bars. The judge strikes his gavel a final time, making the terms absolute. He explicitly mandates that there is absolutely no possibility of early parole, no chance for good behavior reductions, and no legal loopholes left to exploit. They will serve every single grueling day of their sentences. The hammer falls with a loud crack, sealing away decades of their lives. They are officially stripped of their freedom, their assets, and their futures, completely buried by the very legal system they so arrogantly thought they could manipulate. The immediate finality of the sentences triggers rapid movement within the courtroom. The bailiffs step forward immediately, carrying thick, heavy steel transport chains. The metallic clinking fills the air, a harsh and unforgiving sound that replaces the absolute silence. They secure the heavy chains securely around Courtney's waist, linking her wrists and ankles with brutal efficiency. She is completely immobilized, dragged roughly toward the side exit by two massive federal marshals. She does not look back. Dion is processed next. The heavy steel cuffs lock around his wrists, biting into his skin. The bailiff grabs him firmly by the shoulder, physically pivoting him away from the defense table. As he is forcefully led toward the heavily guarded transport doors, Dion abruptly stops. He turns his head, scanning the front row of the gallery until his bloodshot eyes lock entirely onto mine. The massive weight of his 20-year reality is written in every line of his pale, sweaty face. He opens his mouth. No sound manages to escape his trembling throat, but the shape of his lips is unmistakably clear. He looks at me and silently mouths, "I am sorry," silently. I sit in the front row, staring directly back into the hollow eyes of the convicted felon being dragged off to a federal cage. I do not nod in acknowledgement. I do not offer a single sliver of forgiveness. My face remains a mask of absolute, impenetrable stone. There is no lingering fatherly affection to resurrect, and no amount of silent pleading can undo the freezing Canadian blizzard. The time for apologies expired the exact second he swapped my heart medication for peppermint candies. I watch with cold, clinical detachment as the bailiff jerks the transport chain, forcing Dion to face forward. The heavy steel door swings shut behind him with a resonant final thud. I stand up slowly from the wooden bench. I reach down and meticulously button the front of my tailored black suit jacket. I adjust my cuffs, ensuring every single detail of my appearance is absolutely flawless. I turn my back on the empty defense tables and walk deliberately down the center aisle of the courtroom. Mitchell waits by the exit, opening the door for me. I step out into the bright afternoon sun. The malignant tumor has been entirely excised. The bright afternoon sun outside the federal courthouse offers a stark contrast to the cold reality of the sentencing. I do not linger to celebrate the verdict or answer questions from the swarming local journalists. My focus instantly shifts to the final logistical phase of this extraction. The tumor has been excised, but the infected tissue remaining in their suburban neighborhood must be thoroughly sterilized. The following morning, I pull my heavy pickup truck onto the pristine, manicured street where Dion and Courtney built their fraudulent domestic life. The massive modern colonial house stands as a monument to their unchecked greed. It was financed entirely by deceit, funded through forged credit lines, and the systematic draining of my accounts before they attempted their final inheritance grab. I park directly behind a fleet of heavy commercial moving trucks already idling by the curb. I step out of the vehicle holding a thick, rigid manila folder. Inside sits a federal court order signed by Judge Miller just yesterday afternoon. The document grants me immediate, uncontested authorization to seize, liquidate, and auction any physical assets purchased with my stolen funds to recuperate my extensive legal fees and financial damages. I walk up the wide concrete driveway with Mitchell by my side. The air is crisp and completely devoid of the suffocating tension that dominated the courtroom. I am here to reclaim every single dime they bled from my life. The tranquility of the suburban morning is suddenly shattered by a shrill, piercing voice echoing from the front porch. Courtney's mother, an aging socialite desperately clinging to her fading status, stands blocking the ornate double doors. She wears an expensive silk blouse and violently waves her hands at the lead foreman of the moving crew, demanding they halt their operation immediately. Her face is flushed bright red with indignant fury. The moment her frantic eyes lock onto my approaching figure, her target shifts. She abandons the movers and charges directly down the driveway toward me. Her high heels click sharply against the pavement like a rapid drumbeat of pure hostility. She stops inches from my face, vibrating with a toxic mixture of grief and undeniable hatred. She points a manicured finger at my chest, completely ignoring the federal court order visible in my hand. She begins shrieking wild, baseless accusations, holding me entirely responsible for the catastrophic destruction of her daughter's perfect life. She screams that my vindictive cruelty forced a judge to lock her innocent child in a maximum security cage. She completely bypasses the forged documents, the medication swap, and the mob syndicate debts, constructing a delusional reality where her daughter is a helpless martyr sacrificed to satisfy my bruised ego. Her voice climbs higher, threatening to call the police to arrest me for trespassing on private property. I stand perfectly still, allowing her hysterical tirade to wash over me without absorbing a single drop of her toxic energy. Her shrill voice echoes across the quiet neighborhood, drawing the curious stares of several nearby residents. I look at her contorted, angry face and vividly remember the day Dion and Courtney were married. I remember standing in the lavish reception hall, extending my hand to formally welcome this exact woman into our blended family. I remember how she looked at my worn suit, glanced at my calloused hands, and deliberately turned her back, refusing to offer even a basic handshake. She judged my worth strictly by the balance of my bank account, teaching her daughter to do the exact same thing. That inherent generational arrogance is precisely what led Courtney to orchestrate a murder plot. I do not engage in a shouting match or attempt to defend my actions. I simply raise the manila folder and extract a thick, stapled stack of financial documents. I thrust the papers directly into her aggressively pointing hand. The sheer authority of my movement startles her into silence. Her fingers instinctively grasp the paperwork. I inform her that the document is a fully itemized, court-approved invoice. It details the exact sum of the legal fees, the private security costs, the stolen credit card charges, and the massive financial damages her daughter officially owes my estate. The grand total, printed boldly at the bottom of the final page, completely eclipses the value of the suburban house and everything inside it. The sudden realization of the catastrophic financial burden forcefully shuts her mouth. Her eyes widen as she scans the staggering string of zeros attached to her daughter's name. The aggressive, self-righteous matriarch instantly shrinks her entire posture, deflating under the crushing weight of undeniable mathematical reality. I look her dead in the eye, my voice slicing through the morning air with absolute chilling precision. Your family spent 3 decades teaching her how to relentlessly spend money she never earned. I state firmly, leaving absolutely zero room for argument or negotiation. You taught her to view other human beings as disposable stepping stones to achieve a luxurious lifestyle. Now she has to pay the ultimate invoice. I suggest you stop wasting your breath screaming at me in a driveway. You need to take whatever liquid cash your family has left after the public relations disaster and put it in a commissary account. Use it to teach your daughter how to survive the next 25 years locked inside a maximum security federal cell. I do not wait for a response. The brutal finality of my words completely paralyzes her. She stands frozen on the concrete, clutching the devastating invoice against her silk blouse. I turn my back on the silent woman and signal the foreman of the moving crew. I instruct him to execute the court order completely. I order his team to strip the massive house bare down to the copper wiring and the expensive hardwood fixtures if necessary. Every piece of designer furniture, every imported rug, and every high-end appliance purchased with my stolen funds is to be boxed, loaded, and driven straight to the auction house. I walk back down the driveway, pausing only to watch 2 heavy tow trucks secure the gleaming luxury vehicles parked by the curb. The expensive cars are hoisted into the air and unceremoniously dragged away to be liquidated. The suburban illusion is systematically dismantled right in front of my eyes, brick by stolen brick. I open the heavy door of my pickup truck and climb inside. I start the engine, the familiar rumble vibrating through the steering wheel. I pull away from the curb, leaving Courtney's mother standing entirely alone on the empty driveway. She is screaming something. I can no longer hear her voice, completely swallowed by the sound of the moving trucks clearing out the trash. The tires of my heavy pickup truck devour the miles of asphalt, leaving the manicured hypocrisy of the suburbs far behind. The towering steel and glass of the city skyline slowly surrender to the dense, untamed emerald canopy of the northern pine forests. Mitchell rides silently in the passenger seat. His massive frame takes up a considerable amount of space in the cab, yet his presence brings a profound grounding comfort. He has been the impenetrable shield guarding my flank through this entire ordeal. We do not need to fill the quiet hours with meaningless conversation. The rhythmic hum of the engine and the blur of the passing trees speak volumes about the victory we just secured. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I watch the reflection of our cargo. We are towing a brand new heavy-duty aluminum boat securely strapped to the trailer. The sleek metal hull gleams brightly under the unobstructed afternoon sun. Dion deliberately stranded me by taking the old vessel, turning it into an instrument of my execution. Purchasing this replacement was not just a logistical necessity. It is a physical manifestation of my refusal to be a victim. I am actively restoring the mechanics of my independence. We cross the final county line, the air growing noticeably crisper and significantly thinner as we approach the rugged Canadian border. The winding dirt road leading to the secluded lake appears on the horizon, signaling the final phase of my reclamation. We back the trailer down the familiar gravel ramp and ease the new aluminum hull into the crystal-clear water. The outboard motor purrs to life with a flawless, confident roar easily cutting through the glassy surface of the lake. We navigate the winding waterways passing dense thickets of evergreen trees and jagged stone cliffs. As we round the final bend, the remote cabin comes into view. The stark, traumatic memory of the freezing blizzard violently clashes with the current reality. The structure that was specifically chosen to serve as my isolated icy tomb now looks entirely peaceful, bathed in the warm golden light of the early spring sun. The snow has completely melted, revealing the sturdy, reinforced timber frame and the sprawling wooden deck overlooking the water. We tie the boat securely to the weathered dock and step onto the solid planks. The heavy iron key slides perfectly into the brass lock. I turn it, hearing the satisfying mechanical click echo through the quiet woods. I push the heavy oak door open and step inside. The air is stale, trapped since the day I dragged my failing body out of the freezing nightmare. Sunlight pours through the reinforced windows, illuminating the exact spot where I collapsed. I stand on the threshold, absorbing the silence. The cabin is no longer a crime scene or a monument to a son's ultimate betrayal. It is simply a structure waiting to be thoroughly cleansed and reclaimed. I walk directly to the center of the main living area. The stark evidence of Dion's sociopathic cruelty remains exactly where it fell months ago. The shattered fragments of white and red peppermint candies are scattered across the rustic wooden floorboards, hardened into sharp, jagged pieces of betrayal. I retrieve a heavy bristled broom from the utility closet. I sweep the crushed mints together with deliberate, forceful strokes. Every sweep is a systematic erasure of my son from my life. I gather the toxic remnants into a dustpan and dump them directly into the roaring fire I build in the stone hearth, watching the fake medicine melt and burn into absolute nothingness. I then move to the communications desk nestled in the corner of the room. The dispatch radio sits uselessly, the vital power wire still cleanly severed by Dion's pocket knife. I pull a pair of wire strippers and a roll of electrical tape from my gear bag. I strip the rubber casing, meticulously twist the copper threads back together and seal the connection tight. I flip the power switch. The green indicator light instantly glows to life and the steady static of the emergency channel fills the room. The deliberate sabotage is completely reversed. I stand back looking around the expansive sunlit cabin. Valerie and I built this sanctuary with our own hands decades ago. We laid these floorboards and hoisted these timber beams to create a haven of peace and absolute security. Dion attempted to corrupt this sacred space with his blinding greed, trying to turn a monument of love into a slaughterhouse. By clearing the debris and repairing the damage, I am forcefully taking my sanctuary back. The poison has been completely scrubbed from the walls. Mitchell walks through the front door, his heavy boots sounding solid and reassuring against the clean floorboards. He carries 2 heavy crystal tumblers and a sealed bottle of deeply aged premium Kentucky bourbon. He sets the glasses on the sturdy wooden table and cracks the seal, pouring a generous measure of the amber liquid into each glass. He hands me one without saying a word. We walk out the front door and take our seats on the heavy wooden rocking chairs positioned perfectly on the sprawling porch. We sit side by side, looking out over the vast, shimmering expanse of the remote lake. The water is perfectly calm, reflecting the endless blue sky like a massive, flawless mirror. Mitchell raises his glass into the cool spring air. We do not offer a toast to family, and we do not mourn the people we locked away in federal cages. We toast to absolute, uncompromising survival. We touch our glasses together, the sharp clink of heavy crystal sealing our silent pact. We drink to the ruthless execution of justice and the complete obliteration of those who mistook our quiet patience for fatal weakness. The bourbon burns a slow, satisfying trail down my throat, warming the chest that once seized in freezing agony on this exact spot. Mitchell rests his forearms on his knees, his eyes scanning the dense tree line across the water. He turns his head slightly, breaking the comfortable silence. He asks me directly what I intend to do with the massive untouched fortune generating millions inside my hidden commercial trusts, now that the designated blood heir has been permanently severed. I do not answer immediately. I look up into the clear sky. A massive predatory hawk catches a thermal updraft circling effortlessly above the glassy lake, its sharp eyes scanning the surface for movement. The predator understands that survival requires absolute focus and the ruthless elimination of weakness. My wealth will no longer be hoarded for a toxic legacy or squandered on ungrateful parasites who demand the fruits of my labor while plotting my demise. I take another slow sip of the aged bourbon, lowering my glass to rest on my knee. I will use it for those who actually deserve to survive. 6 months pass with the steady, quiet rhythm of a life completely reclaimed. The freezing Canadian blizzard and the sterile federal courtroom feel like echoes from a distant lifetime. I stand on the bustling pavement of the downtown commercial district, the warm autumn sun beating down on the shoulders of my tailored charcoal suit. Directly across the street sits the sprawling commercial plaza I quietly purchased a decade ago to secure my family's financial future. Today, the building serves an entirely different purpose. A heavy industrial crane idles on the sidewalk, its massive hydraulic arm retracting after completing a highly satisfying task. I watch as a crew of demolition workers unceremoniously tosses the shattered remnants of a polished silver sign into the back of a rusted dump truck. The shattered letters once spelled out the name of Courtney's elite exclusionary fashion boutique. Her shrine to vanity and unearned arrogance has been physically ripped from the brick facade. The storefront that once funded her sociopathic lifestyle and fueled her monstrous superiority complex is completely gutted. Bare concrete walls and exposed wiring are all that remain of her engineered socialite illusion. The physical destruction of her business mirrors the absolute demolition of her existence. She is currently sitting in a concrete cell wearing a standard issue uniform, stripped of every luxury she tried to murder me to keep. I feel absolutely no remorse watching her legacy turn into twisted metal and shattered glass. A second crew of workers steps forward to replace the void left by her destruction. They hoist a massive, freshly painted wooden marquee into the air, bolting it firmly into the reinforced brickwork. The new sign reads, "The Valerie Trust Vocational Training and Legal Aid Center." It is named after my late wife, a woman who actually understood the profound value of community and sacrifice. The expansive commercial space has been entirely retrofitted over the past 4 months. Instead of overpriced designer clothing racks, the interior now features state-of-the-art automotive repair bays, carpentry workshops, and a dedicated wing for pro bono legal consultations. I deliberately redirected the massive, uninterrupted cash flow from my commercial trusts to fund this entire operation. My wealth will completely bypass the toxic, severed bloodline that attempted to end my life. I am actively utilizing the millions Dion and Courtney plotted to steal to construct a tangible, unshakable future for underprivileged minority youth across the city. Young men and women who actually understand the brutal reality of survival will receive the tools, the education, and the legal protection they desperately need to succeed. I am replacing the cowardly, entitled son who betrayed me with a generation of resilient strangers who actually deserve the opportunity to thrive. The money they killed for is now funding their exact opposite, planting seeds of genuine strength where only parasitic greed used to grow. A sleek black broadcasting van pulls up to the curb, interrupting my quiet observation. A production crew from a prominent national news network spills out onto the pavement, quickly assembling lights, boom microphones, and a high-definition camera. The lead reporter, a polished woman with practiced synthetic empathy, approaches me with an outstretched hand. Her network has been relentlessly covering the fallout of the murder conspiracy trial, turning the agonizing betrayal of a decorated police veteran into a highly profitable media spectacle. She requested this exclusive on-site interview weeks ago, explicitly promising to highlight the opening of the new vocational center. I reluctantly agreed strictly for the exposure it would generate for the youth programs. The reporter signals her cameraman, framing the shot with the new marquee directly behind my shoulder. The red recording light blinks on. She begins her introduction, completely ignoring the details of the vocational center. Instead, she immediately attempts to manufacture a cheap, highly dramatized, emotional narrative. She lowers her voice to a soft, pitying register, describing me to her national audience as a tragic, heartbroken patriarch. She paints a pathetic picture of a lonely veteran mourning the devastating loss of his only son to the corrupting influence of greed. She asks me how I managed to wake up every single morning carrying the unbearable, crushing grief of a shattered family. She wants tears. She wants a broken man seeking public sympathy. She wants to reduce my calculated, ruthless survival into a soapy, consumable television tragedy. I do not give her the satisfaction of a single tear or a moment of manufactured vulnerability. I step forward, entirely ignoring the reporter and her patronizing questions. I look directly into the cold glass lens of the broadcasting camera, addressing the millions of viewers watching from their living rooms. I am not a victim. I state, my voice dropping to a hard, uncompromising baritone that completely silences the murmuring production crew. Victims are caught off guard and destroyed by the predators around them. I saw exactly who my son and his wife truly were. I did not lose my family to greed. I recognized a lethal threat operating inside my own home, and I neutralized it with absolute prejudice. I hold the camera's gaze, refusing to soften my expression or offer any platitudes about forgiveness. I am not a tragic figure mourning a lost boy. I am a garbage collector. I saw the rot festering in my life, and I took out the trash. They made their choices, and now they are exactly where they belong. I turn my back on the stunned reporter, completely terminating the interview before she can stutter out a follow-up question. I leave the media crew scrambling on the sidewalk and walk directly through the double-glass doors of the new training center. The smell of fresh paint and motor oil instantly washes over me, replacing the toxic stench of my past. I walk into the main automotive bay, where a group of teenagers is gathered around a disassembled engine block. They look up, their hands covered in grease, and greet me with genuine, hard-earned respect. I nod in return, taking off my suit jacket and rolling up my sleeves. I do not look back at the street or the life I left behind. The freezing Canadian cabin, the toxic marriage, and the son who traded his soul for a payout have been entirely eradicated. I stand among these determined, resilient kids, ready to teach them how to rebuild an engine from scratch. I have found my true legacy. I have built a completely new family, bound not by the treacherous obligations of blood, but by the unbreakable foundation of mutual respect. The autumn chill has fully surrendered to a crisp, clear spring. A quiet Tuesday morning settles over my neighborhood, completely devoid of the chaotic urgency that defined the past year. I sit in the heavy oak rocking chair on the front porch of my own home, holding a steaming mug of black coffee. The ceramic is warm against my calloused hands. The street is bathed in a soft golden light, framing the meticulously kept lawns and the gentle sway of the ancient maple trees. Children walk to the corner bus stop with heavy backpacks, their distant laughter floating through the crisp air. It is a scene of profound, uninterrupted normalcy. There are no frantic phone calls demanding emergency cash transfers. There are no surprise visits from a daughter-in-law demanding my keys or dictating my future. The suffocating weight of parental obligation to a parasitic bloodline has been permanently lifted from my shoulders. The air entering my lungs feels incredibly clean, entirely purged of the toxic stress that once governed my existence. I take a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter, robust flavor. I watch a neighbor jog past, offering a polite, respectful wave that I return with a simple nod. The fortress I built around myself is no longer a defensive structure meant to repel emotional predators. It is a genuine sanctuary. I have reclaimed my absolute right to peace, purchasing it with patience and a ruthless commitment to the truth. The familiar hum of the postal delivery truck breaks the morning silence. The mailman pulls up to the curb, stepping out with a small bundle of envelopes secured by a thick rubber band. He walks up the paved driveway, offers a cheerful greeting, and places the stack directly into the wrought iron mailbox mounted next to my front door. I wait for the truck to pull away before setting my coffee mug down on the small wooden side table. I stand up, retrieve the mail, and begin sorting through the routine utility bills and local advertisements. Nestled in the center of the stack is a cheap, coarse brown envelope that instantly commands my absolute attention. The return address, printed strictly in the top left corner, belongs to the maximum security federal penitentiary located 3 states away. My eyes drop to the center of the envelope. The handwriting is jagged, rushed, and unmistakably familiar. It belongs entirely to Dion. The looping letters spelling out my name carry the desperate energy of a man completely out of options. He has undoubtedly exhausted his appeals, realized the absolute bleakness of his concrete cell, and decided to reach out to the only safety net he ever knew. I hold the coarse paper between my fingers, feeling the physical weight of his desperation. I do not feel a sudden surge of paternal sympathy. I look at the sealed envelope for exactly 2 seconds, fully comprehending the cowardly manipulation hiding inside. I do not open the letter. I do not tear the seal to read his fabricated apologies, his desperate pleas for commissary funds, or his sudden, miraculous realization of familial loyalty. Doing so would grant him a sliver of the control he permanently forfeited the moment he attempted to murder me. I turn my back on the peaceful street and walk deliberately into the living room. The large stone fireplace stands in the center of the wall, carrying the remnants of a small fire I built the night before to chase away the evening chill. A few glowing embers still pulse faintly beneath the gray ash. I step onto the stone hearth, clutching the unopened envelope in my right hand. I reach for the long wooden matches resting on the mantel. I strike the red tip against the abrasive striker pad, igniting a bright, sharp flame that completely illuminates the dark corners of the firebox. I do not hesitate. I drop the sealed letter directly onto the glowing embers and immediately touch the burning match to the coarse brown paper. The flame catches instantly. The edges of the envelope curl inward, blackening and crisping as the fire aggressively consumes Dion's final pathetic attempt at manipulation. I stand perfectly still, watching the bright orange fire devour the paper, turning the jagged handwriting into absolutely nothing. The ink melts and the structure of the letter collapses entirely. Within moments, only a fragile pile of white and gray ash remains, scattering effortlessly up the chimney flue. The past is completely obliterated. Every lingering shadow of guilt, every residual drop of paternal regret burns away with that letter. The closure is absolute and entirely on my own terms. The sharp, sudden blast of a heavy truck horn pulls me away from the fireplace. The loud noise shatters the quiet morning, demanding immediate attention. I turn toward the front window and look out at the driveway. Mitchell's massive, rugged pickup truck is idling aggressively right next to my curb. The heavy diesel engine rumbles with a deep, rhythmic vibration. Mitchell leans his broad shoulders out of the open driver's side window, resting his muscular arm against the metal frame. He is holding a sleek graphite fishing rod, waving it back and forth in the crisp spring air like a triumphant flag. His face is split into a wide, genuine grin that reaches his weathered eyes. There is no trace of the grim tactical operative who helped me dismantle a murder conspiracy. He is simply a loyal friend ready to collect on a promise. "You ready to go, old man?" Mitchell shouts over the rumble of his engine, his voice echoing loudly down the peaceful suburban street. The invitation is loud, clear, and completely free of any hidden agendas or toxic obligations. A wide, genuine smile breaks across my face. It is a hard-earned expression of absolute peace forged through months of calculating survival and ruthless justice. I walk over to the hall closet and grab my heavy canvas gear bag, slinging the sturdy strap confidently over my shoulder. I step out onto the front porch, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind me. I slide the deadbolt into place, listening to the satisfying metallic click of absolute security. "Only if I hold the boat keys," I shout back, walking down the concrete steps toward the idling truck. Mitchell laughs out loud, a booming, authentic sound that perfectly matches the bright morning sun. I climb into the passenger seat, throwing my bag into the back. As Mitchell shifts the heavy truck into gear and pulls away from the curb, I look out the window at the clear, unobstructed horizon. The parasites who plotted to drain my life are securely locked inside concrete cages, counting the endless days of their irredeemable sentences. The survivor has reclaimed everything. I own my time, my wealth, and my world. It is the perfect, silent, and absolute adjustment. If you enjoyed this story of justice and survival, please hit the like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Warwick's ultimate revenge, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories.